Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. Today we are looking at House Tully. I think at the end of my last live stream I suggested maybe we'll do House Mallister this time, but I'll be honest, I was reading around and I got more excited by House Tully this week and I thought this is what I want to talk about. So that's what we're doing. If you're a House Mallister fan, we will come back to House Mallister, do not worry, probably as part of a wider roundup of all of the rest of the Riverlands in a week or two's time. But today we are looking at House Tully, who I think they often get underplayed, not just because in the show they and in the books, frankly, they sort of get overrun quite a lot, but also because they are one of the weaker houses in the Riverlands. As we've been looking at, as we've been going around a few of the other houses in the Riverlands, it's always this theme has come through, is that House Tully are not the biggest and strongest house in the Riverlands. They might be the Lords Paramount, but they're not the biggest or strongest or oldest of these houses. So sometimes they kind of get overlooked. But they are clearly very important to this plot. Some of the most central characters are House Tully characters. So we'll dive into this straight away. As always, I've got a whole load of questions for my patrons we're going to be working our way through. I'll pick up as much as I can in the chat. But let's start with just a little bit of an overview of House Tully and their history, their character. They are an old house, but not one of these ancient houses that we sometimes come across, like the Starks, for example. They were not originally kings, as many of these houses in the Riverlands were. They were not originally kings, but they were, the first we hear of them, they were allies and supporters of House Mud, who at the time were the kings of the Riverlands, and the hills in the Riverlands, I think they called it. That with Christopher IV, I think it was, and there they had this position of influence and a bit of power, but they were not kings themselves. At which point the Andals came. Now, the Andal invasion into Westeros was not an invasion. We talk about it as being an invasion. This was a very long, slow, armed immigration is probably the best way of saying it. This took centuries. Very slowly, the Andals came across, pushed further and further inland, and eventually they came across House Mud, and Christopher was killed, and the Tullys bent the knee. They are, we're told, a family of first men blood. However, they then at this point adopted the customs, the religion of the Andals coming in, and for their new loyalty, they were given a bit of land, the bit of land that we now know around Riverrun, which is the sort of the joining point of the Red Fork and the Tumblestone River. And they built this fantastic castle literally in the river. You can get access to it, but if they want to, they can just, they've got this clever set of blocks and weirs and things that they can just basically cut off everyone and have the river as the moat to the castle. And they gained this land, and we don't really hear huge amounts about them for the next 1,000 years, really. They seem to have sort of stayed largely under the radar. The next time they appear is when we get to Aegon's invasion. At this point, House Hoare were in charge. From the Iron Islands were in charge of the Riverlands, the kings of the Isles and the rivers, and they'd just been building Harrenhal. Harren the Black had just been building Harrenhal. And House Tully were obviously, they owed their allegiance to House Hoare, but when they saw the dragons, when they saw the Targaryens coming, the first house, really the first significant house to turn and lead others away from House Hoare and bend the knee to Aegon was House Tully. Then Harrenhal happened. Harrenhal was destroyed. House Hoare was destroyed, and Aegon needed a new He didn't want to have a king in the Riverlands, but he did want to have somebody in charge of that area, that part of land. And so he made House Tully, he promoted them up to being Lords Paramount of the Riverlands. This was not taken particularly well by some of the other houses. There are 3-4 other houses, House Vance, Bracken, Blackwood, who could put larger forces out into the field. We've got House Frey, House Mouton were definitely richer. House Mallister had a more storied past. They've been kings in the past, has had some of those other houses. But House Tully were given this honour of being Lords Paramount. And they were backed, therefore, by the Targaryens, so nobody else could really push against them. Then what happens over the course of the first few generations of Targaryen rule is it's really interesting to see how the Tullys find themselves, you could think that this was just a chance. I suspect that this was actually probably clever understanding of the political landscape, find themselves on the right side of history each time. So we've already seen that they saw what was happening with the Andal invasion. They slowly shifted there. They saw what happened with Aegon's invasion. They shifted across to support Aegon. Then they got on the right side of the next king, Aenys I, in helping support against Harren the Red. The Iron Islands rebelled, basically. Then they supported Maegor when Maegor took the throne by force. Then they supported Jaehaerys when Jaehaerys took the throne by force. Then you fast forward to just before the Dance of the Dragons. You see when we get the Great Council, of 101, where they are trying to decide who's going to be the next king after Jaehaerys. They come out in favor of Viserys, who emerges victorious. They then, during the Dance of the Dragons, come out on the side, which sort of won, I suppose, in the end. It's quite a everybody lost the Dance of the Dragons, spoiler alert, but that's the side they chose. They then stayed on side until the Targaryens, until we get up to Robert's Rebellion. They were on the side of the rebellion, which was victorious. The Tullys managed to always seem to be on the right side of history, all the way up to the story that we have going on in A Song of Ice and Fire. Let's focus in a little bit more on that, because obviously we have a bit more background. We don't have much detail about the wider Tully family tree. We know that at the start of A Song of Ice and Fire, and indeed when Robert's Rebellion happened, then the Lord was Hoster Tully. And he had a brother, Brynden Tully, who became known as the Black Fish. This is because this is actually a name he took on himself, which was that there was a rift between Hoster and his brother Brynden. Hoster was very focused on getting advantageous marriages for his family, and again playing the political game. And he wanted to marry his brother to a Redwyne woman. Now, this would have been quite a good match. The Redwynes are old, they're rich family. They're actually very important. We'll come on to them, I'm sure, later when we get down into the Reach, but they have got one of the largest navies in all of Westeros. But Brynden said no. He refused this, and this created a rift. Hoster called his brother, he said he's like the black goat of the family, and then Brynden says, but we're Tullys, we're fish, not goats. I am the black fish. And from that moment on, he made that his personal sigil, his banner, a black fish. But Hoster, despite this animosity between these two brothers, Hoster had 3 children. Cat, Lysa and Edmure. Sadly, his wife died when during childbirth. A fourth child would have been another son, but he manages to get advantageous marriages for both Kat, who was originally supposed to be marrying Brandon, but then eventually she married Ned, and Lysa, who was originally supposed to be marrying Jaime Lannister, but then eventually ended up marrying Jon Arryn. He didn't get the marriage sorted for Edmure, who was a few years younger. But this did place the Tullys right at the heart of this alliance, which led to, or was basically the main building block of Robert's rebellion. So, after the rebellion, the Tullys just carried on ruling as they were before, until we get to the main story, where we see this really from the Starks' perspective, or maybe the Lannisters. From the Tullys' perspective, it's slightly different, because they are in the Riverlands, and the Riverlands border, I think, pretty much all but one of the different parts of the Seven Kingdoms. They are in the middle, and if there's going to be a war, it always happens pretty much in the Riverlands. And as rumors of war were starting, then Edmure, who was now de facto ruler, Hoster was still alive, but very old and very ill, and they didn't advertise quite how ill Hoster was for fear of coming across as weak, but basically Edmure, through the story, is the person who has been acting effectively as leader of the house. Just very quickly, saw HRE in the chat saying, I've been watching your videos for a few months. This is the first time I'm able to catch you live. Well, welcome. So what did Edmure do? He wanted to protect his land. Quite early on, raiding parties started taking out a little town here, a farm there, a small holdfast. These were Lannister troops just undercover, led by the Mountain and a couple of others, Vargo Hoat, and they were going around and raiding and pillaging the Riverlands. There's also, it became very clear, the Lannisters had got a large army right on the border of the Riverlands. And actually, let me just quickly bring up this this map here, which is the one I usually use. This is quartermaster.info. Please do go and support them. This is the Riverlands here. Riverrun is actually a lot further to the west than many people might think. If you see that mountain range on the left there, that's the mountain range that goes through the Westerlands. Now, just where it's sort of like, it sort of goes at right angles north and then sort of juts eastwards, just underneath that, that is where Riverrun is. It is right next to the border with the Westerlands. And if the Lannisters were going to come in and attack, they were going to be coming through one of these mountain passes, probably. So Edmure decided what he would do was to take an army out and try and confront this army, which Jaime, by this point, having fled King's Landing, he then picked up with an army and defeated Edmure. And Edmure then became captured, and Jaime pushed forward to besiege Riverrun. This was while the rest of the Riverlands were out, sort of being ransacked basically by the Mountain. One of the strategic issues that had happened there was what Edmure had done was spread his forces thinly. He'd had a force and gone out and tried to face Jaime, but He'd allowed most of his army to be going out and helping to defend their local area. He hadn't called up all the banners, as it were, and called all of the army in from the extent of his area. He'd allowed them to stay at home and defend themselves. Was that wise? You can be the judge of that. Anyway, Jamie then is besieging River Run, at which point we then get Rob, who has come down south with his army. He then, as we know, he splits his army. The main force of the army goes down the King's Road, heading towards King's Landing. That's where Tywin's army meets them. But he sends a smaller force, a faster force, off across the river, crossing at the Twins at great cost to himself, obviously, crossing at the Twins, heading down, and caught the Jamie's forces by surprise, basically. The reason why they caught them by surprise is the Blackfish was leading a scouting group which took out everything in its way. Every single possible bit of intelligence that there's an army coming, he stopped that. He had his troops stationed outside the Twins, shooting down any birds or ravens that might go off, just in case Walder Frey might be trying to send some messages off to some other people that they didn't want any messages going through. Jamie was caught completely by surprise, and this is to the credit of the Blackfish. The Battle of the Whispering Wood. Then we have the battle, the breaking of the siege of River Run. Edmure Tully gets freed, and for a short while, River Run becomes the heart of Robb Stark's army and his kingdom, really. Then Robb heads off west, taking with him the Blackfish, and again, this small, fast-moving force into the Westerlands. His idea was that he wanted to get Tywin Lannister, who was currently stationed with his army at the Harrenhal. He wanted to draw him out to the west, into the Westerlands, and then he would be able to, he thought, outmaneuver him. He thought that that would free up the way, potentially, for Roose Bolton with the majority of his army to go down to King's Landing. Maybe he could capture Tywin's army between the two parts of his army. This was the plan. He goes around raiding the Westerlands, and eventually Tywin does head off. He takes the bait and heads west. In order to get to the Westerlands, he has to cross the river, the Red Fork River. And Edmure decides that he is going to stop Tywin from doing this. Now, we've got some questions on this, so I will dig into all of the whys and wherefores of that in just one moment. But it happened. Edmure won that battle. Let's give him some flowers for that. At the very least, he won that battle. Tywin was repulsed. He was prevented from crossing the river. Tywin then turns around. News has come out of what has happened. Renly is dead. There's a chance now to possibly gain an alliance with the Tyrells. He heads off just in time to go and seal the alliance and then relieve the defense of King's Landing. Now, when the Blackfish comes back with Robb, they blame Edmure. They say this is his fault, that he should have let Tywin through. We will get into in a moment whether or not that was fair or not. But they kind of then pressure Edmure into helping them get the Freys back on side by him marrying Roslyn Frey and basically replacing the marriage that was supposed to happen with Robb and a Frey. Was going to be then Edmure and a Frey. Obviously, that didn't go to plan. That's where we have the Red Wedding. Edmure then gets captured and held at the Twins with his wife, interestingly, and they seem to get on. At least from what we hear, she then becomes pregnant. And Riverrun, however, was being held by the Blackfish. He was there with Jane Westerling, and that's Rob's queen. He had sworn fealty to Rob as his king, and this was his queen. He'd been told to keep charge of her, look after her, protect her. And he did. When the Lannisters came again to besiege Riverrun, he just said no. And it's a quite easily defended castle, and he just refused to succumb. This standoff carried on even when Edmure himself is brought, and the Freys outside threaten to kill him if the Blackfish doesn't hand over control of Riverrun. And basically Brynden Blackfish says, I'm not falling for that one. And they try pretty much on a daily basis, and pretty much on a daily basis he says, I'm still not falling for that one. Then Rob comes in, not Rob, sorry, Jamie arrives and sorts this out pretty much within a day. And we have to give some props to Jamie here for being pretty impressive and figuring out the psychology of how to do this. What he does is he gets Edmure, and he actually gives him a bath. He says, clean yourself up, you're not looking that great, and I'm going to talk to you while this is happening. And he says there's one of two ways that this is going to go. The first is that you walk into your, that is your castle, you walk into your castle and you order them to stand down and let us in. If you do that, then I'll let the garrison go. The Blackfish can go and take the Black if he wants to. He can go and join the Night's Watch. You've got a choice. You can either come over to the Westlands and basically be on house arrest, but you'll be with your wife and child because she's pregnant now. Or if you would rather, you can take the Black yourself. That's option number one. Option number two is you don't do that. And instead, what's going to happen is I will attack this castle. And the first people I'm going to use are all of the Riverlands lords in my army who you think that they're your people. But I am going to make them throw themselves against the wall of your castle. I'm going to make your troops within that castle have to kill the other Riverlanders. And once they've gone, then I'll throw a whole load of Freys. I don't care about the Freys. Who cares about the Freys? I'm going to send the Frey army at there. And once they're all gone, after that, once all of your defenders, they've run out of arrows, they've run out of burning oil to throw over, once they're tired because they've been defending it for days and days on end without any sleep, after that I will send my troops in. And you've seen our siege weapons. We've got trebuchet, we've got ballistas, we've got everything we could possibly need to get into this castle. It'll take a lot, but we will do it. And when that happens, I will kill every single person that I find in that castle. And when that happens, I will then destroy the castle itself. Your family home that's been there for 1,000 years, I will knock down every stone. The river will wash over it. It will be no more. No one will know that there's ever been a House Tully. You, I will let live. And I will send you the child that you have got. When it is born, I will put it in a trebuchet and I will fling it into the river. That's your second option. And then he walks out and he leaves a guy there, a musician, playing the Rains of Castamere and singing the Rains of Castamere. This is an incredibly ballsy move from Jamie, but it works. Edmure decides, rather than the absolute death of his entire house, he is going to go in there, talk to the Blackfish, and get the Blackfish to hand over the castle, and he will submit to the Lannisters. However, Edmure does, when he goes in there, he does allow the blackfish to swim away, basically. And another question I've got is what's going on there? What will happen next with the blackfish? While all this is going on, the other two Tully children, we should probably just pick on Lysa. Tully obviously married John Arryn, became Lysa Arryn. She, by this point in the story, she has been killed. But her son, Robin Arryn, is then technically, he's underage, but he's technically the Lord of the Eyrie. Catelyn Tully, Catelyn Stark, was killed at the Red Wedding, but has come back as Lady Stoneheart, and is now in and around the Riverlands as well. So that is House Tully. That's the story we've got. We've got quite a few fascinating characters, but also going back through history, a house that survives. That's probably the best way to put it. It seems to have this natural instinct as a house to see who is the power at that particular moment in time, and then get behind that power. And that sort of is what is happening in the story that we've got. They sway towards the Starks, but then they swaying back to the Lannisters. Will they sway back once more? I suspect they probably will. Let's go to the chat. Let's see what questions we've got here. I might have got some before I went live. Let's just have a quick check for that. Steve Ash Lerner Turner with your customary joke. A screwdriver rolls into a bar. Barman says, "Hey, we have a drink named after you." "Really?" squeaks the screwdriver. "You have a drink called Cuthbert?" Very good. Thank you very much. Murphy's saying, "Huzzah, new stream. Love the videos and streams. Cheers, brother." Well, thank you very much. And Alex Bryce saying or asking, "What do you think the Blackfish is up to? Has he got his own small band of supporters, or is it possible he has joined up with the Brotherhood Without Banners and possibly works for Lady Stoneheart?" Right. Well, I've got a few questions from my patrons about that, so some of that I'm going to bundle up with those later, if that's okay. But I'll happily sort of pick up on the Blackfish's position right now. So where's he at? What does he know? Well, he doesn't know, we assume, about Lady Stoneheart. It's possible that he's learned. The Brotherhood Without Banners do have somebody inside Riverrun, but he's had a long chat, we can assume, with Edmure. And what does Edmure know? Well, he knows about the will. He knows about Robb Stark's will, and he knows that Jon has been named as the heir. So that's one other thing that he knows. But he also, I think, can be pretty sure that the plan will be for Jane Westerling and Edmure to be heading west, to be heading to the Westlands, to be heading basically to Casterly Rock. So that strikes me as being, if he's staying local, that's what he's doing. Maybe he would head up to go and find Jon, the heir. But at the same time, if he was going to do that, he might as well have taken the Black. There's no need for him to sort of escape and be on the run. He could come up with he was given the opportunity to take a legitimate route up north. So I suspect it's probably not that. The garrison, interestingly, the Riverrun garrison were also, their armor and arms were taken from them, but they were released. Jaime just sort of sent them out into the wild. So he may get together with them. He knows that part of the world really well. He's an expert tracker. He's an expert scout, so he will be able to find where they are. So that's his situation. I think the thing when you're trying to understand the Blackfish is try to get to what actually is his motivation. Where's his heart? He doesn't come across as being a person who can be sort of swayed. He does what he wants to do, but also he is about family, duty, honor. These are the house words. When probably one of the more telling moments we have is that having gone with Lysa Arryn over to the Vale, and he got a job there, very prestigious post, in fact, keeper of the gate. This was in charge of who managed to get in and out of the Vale, basically. And when Cat arrives, and Cat tells him the situation and basically says, River Run, your family needs you, he didn't think twice about it. He said, okay, that's it. I know I've been here for 15 years, but I'm gone. I'm going to go with you, and we're going to go back. He went back to the brother that he was estranged from. He went back to help out his family. So I think that at its heart, that seems to be what drives him: family, duty, honor. Let's have a look. Pierre Davis says Blackfish makes his way to the Vale to help Sansa shed light on Littlefinger and become Queen of the North. Yeah, so this is another possibility we have for him. This is, if you think about it, he's got this moment. We say, well, what's he going to do? There are so many different possibilities of what he might do. He could go east. That's another possibility. He could go back to the Vale. News of her death, I don't think it's reached them yet. So it might be a chance now for him to sort of go back and try again. But he doesn't know that Sansa's there. So that wouldn't be a driver for him to go there. And he's sort of given up on Lysa. That's the impression we got. He's decided she's not going to join this war. So I like the idea that, story-wise, yeah, it would be quite fun for him to head back. He has got history with Littlefinger, because Littlefinger, way back, he was fostered at Riverrun, so he knows all of these, all of the Tullys, and actually, he seems to have followed the Blackfish around quite a lot, and the Blackfish seems to have cared for him a bit, in quite a gruff way. There was a time when, because Littlefinger was in love with Catelyn Stark, and when he discovered that she'd been engaged to Brandon Stark, then he got drunk, absolutely, and he's like passed out, and the person who looked after him, the person who picked him up and carried him back to his rooms, that was the Blackfish. So there is a link across there, and the Blackfish will know what Littlefinger is like. So yeah, should they ever meet, there definitely is some sort of history going on there. We've still got the map up, Lady Pushkins. Okay, let's see whether we can. There we go. That's me in full size again. And let's go to Jasper Lane. Stole this from Lem. Is this somebody else in the chat? If so, thank you so much. Saying, if House Tully had not been the first in the Riverlands to go to Aegon's side, who do you think would have been selected as Lord? I think the obvious answer is whoever was first. It's noticeable that... well, actually, let me take a step back. If you are Aegon and you take over all of this land and you need allies, because you can't, as much as he could like go out and fly out with a dragon and burn people, he knew that wasn't the long-term solution to keeping this country together. You can't always just rule with fear, and you can't always micromanage everything either. He wanted somebody that he could trust. And so, in the absence of any other information that he had, he went with the person who appeared the most loyal. And actually, I've forgotten their name, but the Lord Tully, the first Lord Tully, who was Lord Paramount, he was even made, for a couple of years, he was made Hand of the King. That's how much he got trusted. Because when you think about it, most of the Seven Kingdoms, Aegon's decision on who should be in charge of a certain area was pretty straightforward. The Starks bent the knee, the Starks can stay. The Lannisters bent the knee, the Lannisters can stay. Ditto the Arryns. The Baratheons, they were already allies, and they took over Storm's End, having defeated House Durrandon. Down in the Reach, we did get a handover of power there, but it was to the people who were the stewards, the people who were already well involved in running that part of the world. The only place that he had to make a decision, really, was the Riverlands. And on what basis could he make that decision? He could have put a completely new lord in from somewhere else, but that they would have had no buy-in at all from anyone. So he had to pick one of the noble lords. He might as well pick the one that he thought had shown he took, rewarding the people who had done the best for him. Andrew Kay saying House Tully were often on the right side of history, except for Maegor. Guess their priority was the status quo or maintaining their position with that. Yeah, so when I say on the right side of history, what I mean is they picked the winners. That's what I mean. Not necessarily that they were morally on the right side each time. Sometimes we might think that they were, but they chose to side with Maegor when certainly there were quite a few people very near them who had decided to side with Aegon the Uncrowned. When they decided to shift their support over to Charis, yes, a lot of people were doing it at that point, but it wasn't, it wasn't universal. So they going with Maegor was, I think, not necessarily a decision that this is the person we think is the best person to be king. It was who they thought was going to be king, and they were right. Just Belaine saying, yeah, I don't think it's the most. I would agree that Riverrun is not the most secure. I mean, if you're talking across all of Westeros, then you've got the Eyrie is pretty hard to capture, it has to be said, unless you have a dragon. Similarly, Casterly Rock is very hard. Storm's End is very hard to capture. So there are some castles that are legendarily incredibly hard to conquer. But Riverrun is certainly up there as one of the stronger, harder ones to do. Let's go to some questions from my patrons. Diego Godoy. Hola, Robert. Hola to you. The more I read A Song of Ice and Fire, the more I find Edmure to be blameless in the whole controversy with Robb and the Blackfish about not trapping the Lannisters. Do you think there's a real argument here where Edmure holds any fair blame, or were they just taking their frustrations out on him? Okay. Let's get into this, because this is one of the things where people seem to have very strong views on. Now, was Edmure in the wrong? is there a way that you could argue that he acted sensibly? So the situation is this, and we have to remember all of this. We see none of this from Edmure's perspective. We see this from Kat's perspective, and Kat is his older sister. He is her little brother. And Kat is, it's probably fair to say, quite a judgmental character. So she will be quite a biased interpreter of events. But here's, as best we can sort of map out, as objectively as we can, sort of a set of events, and then we can try and work out whether that feels like he was in the wrong. So Rob and the Blackfish and a few others have this council of war. Edmure is not at it. They come up with this grand plan that they're going out west. They're going to raid the Westerlands. They're going to attack places out there, and they're going to draw Tywin out. And they're going to draw him out from where he's safely encamped in Harrenhal, which is a massive castle, safely encamped there. They're going to draw him out into the Westerlands, and they think they'll be able to find some way there that they'll get they'll find some good land that's advantageous for them, and they will be able to defeat him, or at the very least, that will free up the route for Roose Bolton with the main bulk of the force to head down to King's Landing. So that's the plan. But what they don't explain all of this plan and thinking to Edmure. What they say to him is, you stay here. You look after Riverrun, and you're here. Don't do much, basically. So Edmure does largely stay there. He is increasingly concerned about his lands, the lands that he is in charge of in the Riverlands. These raids I was talking about earlier, they're carrying on. His people are dying. The winter is coming, and the farms are being destroyed. There's a big concern for him there. Now, this is sort of keeping him vaguely occupied. When news comes in that Tywin has abandoned Harrenhal and he's heading west. He's heading towards Riverrun, no less. And also, he gets the morning before he sets off on this, he gets a message saying Roose Bolton is heading down to capture Harrenhal. He's heard as well that Harrenhal is now empty. This very strategically important castle, which has been guarding the route to King's Landing. Now, Team Stark. Let's not forget, Roose Bolton at this time, we think, is on Team Stark. Everyone thinks he's on Team Stark, and he's going to go and claim Harrenhal. So Edmure thinks, actually, you know what? There's an opportunity here. Nobody really foresaw this. There's an opportunity here. I think that we can prevent Tywin from crossing the river. I know the Riverlands. We can prevent him from crossing the river. We can damage his army quite significantly and trap him then. He's now out of his castle. He's got an army out in the middle of nowhere. He can't cross the river this direction. Roose Bolton, with the large bulk of the northern force, is now set in the castle between him and King's Landing. We're in a good strategic position. And he heads down, and it works. He does what he wants to do. He does inflict some damage on Tywin's army. Tywin does have to admit defeat. And Edmure, if you just take that one battle on its own, Edmure defeated Tywin in a battle. He then heads back up to Riverrun. Now, on the TV show, which I think we sometimes get in our head, they kind of sort of downplayed what this was to him just wanting to win a battle. I think it was over a mill or something. So they don't explain all of the strategic stuff. But anyway, Rob and the Blackfish come back and they basically say, Edmure, you've got it all wrong. He should have been allowed through. If he'd been allowed through, then first of all, our plan would have worked. We had this perfect place where we could have ambushed him. It was going to be great. We could have defeated him there in the west, and he wouldn't have got the news about what happened with Renly's death. That changed the course of the war. Renly's death suddenly meant that you could get an alliance going with the Reach. I always forget the name of like a house in the Reach with the Reach, basically. I always get a mind blank on the most embarrassing moment once every stream. Anyway, he could then forge the alliance, the Tyrells. Thank you. He could then forge the alliance with the Tyrells. They got back in time to help save King's Landing. And basically, Rob and the Blackfish came and said, the entire war is lost and it's all your fault. And the only way for you to make up for this is to go and marry in a fray. And Edmure kind of admits defeat and says, okay, I guess I'll have to do that. So is this Edmure getting it wrong? Well, I think at the very least we have to say this wasn't all down to Edmure. The plan going wrong, Rob's plan going wrong, was not all down to Edmure. It's a lack of communication on Rob's part. He had not told Edmure the entire plan, and so why he then expected Edmure to understand the entire plan, it seems a little unfair. You also have to say that in the absence of knowing that plan, Edmure's idea to try and stop Tywin crossing the river and then trap him between his army and Roose Bolton's army, that was at least as sensible an idea as Robb Stark's plan. We never saw what would have happened had Tywin made his way all the way over into the Westerlands. But the confidence that Robb and the Blackfish had that they would be able to defeat Tywin's army when they were outnumbered 3-1 in Tywin's own backyard, I think, I wouldn't say it's an unfounded confidence, but I think that they had expectations of victory that probably should have been tempered with a little bit more realism. Let's put it that way. So should Edmure have just done what he was told and stay there? Probably he should. But can we say that this is all his fault? No. I think the other thing to point out is this idea that if Edmure had allowed Tywin to cross, then Tywin wouldn't have got the message about Renly's death quickly enough. And he wouldn't have been able to turn around and get back and save King's Landing in time. I don't think that is necessarily accurate. News of what had happened had reached Riverrun already. It was going towards Tywin had a slow-moving army, a lot of infantry. He was trying to get it across a river. The news was going to reach him at some point in the next day or two anyway, regardless of whether he crossed the river or not. So I think that, again, that's not really a strong argument. Even if he had got a day across the river, then he would have then been able to just turn around and go back. So just having a quick flick through the chat. Agree Weirwood saying Rob's plan was better, but Edmure didn't know it. Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly an entirely fair reading of it. Weirwood Net saying, I did slander Edmure's name but spelt it wrong, so it does not count. Andrew Kay saying Rob had plenty of experience around him that should have made sure all instructions were communicated clearly. Yeah, I mean, I think the general, and this is actually something I've noticed in the fandom over the course of the last 5 years or so, is the TV show made him out to be really not a competent or clever character in any way, shape, or form, and that he did muck up, and it is his fault that Rob lost the war. That's not what happened in the books. It's a lot more nuanced there. Nobody comes out sort of bright, shiny, they did everything right. But also, Edmure definitely, I don't think you can say he did everything wrong. This does lead into the second quote. Martin S. saying, hello, Robert. I just want to know if there is any reason Edmure Tully is so incompetent. Most noblemen in Westeros at the time of Game of Thrones seem to at least have some kind of competence, but Edmure Tully comes off as almost comic relief or the butt of a joke. It's surprising that Robb Stark gave him such responsibilities with him being the way he is. So I think this is the TV show as much as anything else. Now, just in terms of why Robb gave him the power and authority, I think this is because he was Lord Paramount of the Riverlands, and he was brother to Robb's mother. If Robb had not let him, I mean, basically all Robb did was say, sit in your castle and be in charge of your castle. It's actually not giving him much authority at all. He took authority away from Edmure rather than gave him authority. And if he had done any more than that, if he had said, actually, I don't want you to be in charge of your own castle, that would have been a massive slap in the face. And that would have been the kind of thing that could have made the Tullys as a whole take offense. Yes, obviously, Cat is there going to be on Team Robb, but Edmure could live with being told to you stay in your castle and look after your castle. But to be told, actually, you're not allowed to even lead the defense of your own lands, that would be too much. One other thing I think I would say about Edmure, sort of is in his defense, is that, well, two things, I think. Firstly, he didn't have an easy time of it. So he gets dropped in. He's not old. He gets dropped in. His father is dying, and suddenly he's faced with some actually quite hard decisions. Before the country is officially, or the land is officially at war, he then has to decide how does he defend his own lands. He can't look as if he's the warmonger, which is basically what the part of the idea was from the Lannisters, is to make the other people look like they're the warmongers. So he couldn't do that. And his lands were hit the hardest out of all of the lands in Westeros. So he had a tough time of it. After that, he actually found, although probably not his fault, but the Riverlands then pronounced Robb king, which would they have done if he was more of a charismatic leader? We don't know, but it completely undermined him. Suddenly he was no longer the most important person in his own castle. The most important person in his own castle is this other guy who's just suddenly appeared from the north. So that completely undermined his authority. He also had his elder sister coming in, undermining his authority. And the most of the story, we have to remember, he's he's actually a captive. He's a prisoner. He's the amount of times he's actually got his own volition to choose the things to do is relatively limited. He gets captured quite early on in the war before he gets released. Then he gets captured at the Red Wedding, and from the Red Wedding onwards, he is a captive of the Lannisters. The decisions he makes, as much as anything else, that you may question, and I kind of go easy on him for this, they seem to be centered around caring about people. For example, Kat, when she arrives at Riverrun and she looks around and she says, "Oh, you've taken in all of these refugees from the Riverlands, and they're eating all of the food. If there's a siege, then you're not going to have much food left," which is, from a strategic perspective, I'm sure entirely correct. But from a human perspective, he was looking after his people. But we're getting this from Kat's perspective, and she's just looking at it. She's not caring about the people. She's caring about the strategy of the war. Then we get the decision to hand over Riverrun. I've already gone through it. He was faced with these two options, and one of which was the destruction of his family and his lands and the people he was supposed to be protecting and caring for. And he decided against that. Jamie, actually, afterwards, he's in conversation. I can't remember who he was in conversation with, but they basically say, yeah, and Edmure is just going to be remembered as like this coward who gave up his lands and bent the knee to the Lannisters, basically. And Jamie says, yeah, but I kind of understand, because he knew who my father was and he knew that I was capable of what I was threatening to do. And if Jamie can be empathetic towards that situation, then I think we probably can too. And I think the other thing we have to sort of say slightly in his defense is he didn't, given this situation, he pushed his luck just far enough to find a middle ground by letting the blackfish out. This was him deliberately. He allowed the blackfish to escape. That was against what Jamie wanted. He was pushing Jamie, but only just far enough that he knew that Jamie would be annoyed, but he would stick to what he'd said before. So I don't tend to. I mean, the more I read the story, the more I kind of sympathize with him. He's never going to be this character who we get behind and we're cheering on and saying, yeah, come on, Edmure, you're the best. But at the same time, he strikes me as being a normal guy in incredibly trying circumstances who's just trying to do his best and actually cares about the people around him. And yeah, he might not be great at firing. If you remember when it's the thing behind me, when he's firing the bow when his father's funeral boat goes and he's trying to set fire to it. Maybe he's not very good at firing arrows. Maybe he's not very good at war strategy, but his heart does seem to be in the right place. He does seem to care about his people, which is what I suppose we should be looking for from the rulers. Let's go to, I've got another question here somewhere. Michelle Rimo saying, after reading the book, after watching the show, they butchered Edmure, and I hate Hoster's funeral. In the book, the Blackfish took over because Edmure was distraught over his father's death, not incompetent. Yeah, I mean, it's subtleties like that that you kind of miss. They particularly also that the last scene. I don't know whether they count it as a great council scene when they're all sitting in that circle right at the very end of season 8, and he sort of stands up and sort of says a few words, and Sansa tells him to sit down. It's like by this point they had just turned him into a character that we can laugh at. And that's not, I think, where George R. R. Martin would want us to be with this character. I think he would want us to be sympathetic towards him. Stephanie Lash, thank you very much, saying, "Hi Robert, love this focus on the families. Question, if Catelyn had not died in the Red Wedding, what would it have taken for her to warm to John? What would this look like?" I mean, could she warm to John? She certainly hadn't by the point of her death. When John was, or just before, when Rob was basically drafting up his will, he went and had a chat with her, and he said, "I'm going to make John my heir," and she is just vehemently against it, and not just because she thinks that Arya is still alive. She hates this idea, and so I don't think, had she survived, as long as she thought that John was who Ned had said he was, his love child, with another woman that he did not wish to talk about, and then decided to raise alongside her children. She saw that as a big slap in the face, basically. Interestingly enough, because we do see this from her perspective, we do get a little bit of extra layer of nuance here. It's not just that she hated the fact that Ned had slept with a woman while out at war, nor was it the fact that he then acknowledged John or even cared about him as he grew up. She actually thinks to herself, lots of men do. I'd only just known him for like a couple of weeks. That I don't feel. I mean, we'd literally only just met. He was going out to war. He could have died at any moment. She understood him having an affair, effectively. Lots of lords did that in that time. She even kind of understood him taking care of John. She said what he could have done is he could have put him, found like a holdfast not too far from Winterfell, made sure that he'd got a good family to look after him, and sort of given him, a little bit of money and stuff like that. That she would have been absolutely fine about that. It was okay. She, even if it was known that this was his bastard child, she would have been okay. The thing that she did not like was the fact that she had come up from Riverrun with her newborn child to this strange land with strange customs, different religions. People looked different. People had a different way of life. And she had arrived there with no one, basically. Maester Lewin, who she knew, but basically no one. And she'd arrived there, and John had already been installed. She was not there suddenly arriving. I am here bringing this son, this child of Ned Stark here. She's there. Oh, it's another one. We've already got one from him. He's deposited that one up here already. That was the kind of problem. And then John was brought up alongside the other children. So suddenly she is not in this place where she wanted to be, at the heart of Winterfell. So that's what she had the problem with. Now, what could have made her at some point be better, sort of drop her hatred of John? The only thing is to understand that what Ned had done and why. If she ever learned that he had brought Ned up there because it wasn't his son, he pretended it was. He pretended it was to absolutely everybody, because that was the way to protect John. If she learned that, perhaps that would make her drop her hatred of him in some way. It's I think the same kind of feeling you get when she, I think, would understand. She understood this idea that they didn't really know each other to start with, and so if he had slept with someone, okay, she kind of understood. She might not be happy about it, but she kind of understood. In the same way, I think she would kind of understand him not trusting her with that bit of information, that actually this is Rhaegar and Lyanna's son, and if anyone finds out, then he'll be killed. I think she would have understood. So will she ever get to that? I mean, that's, I think, certainly not in the next, first half of the next book, probably not all of the next book, but potentially at some point Lady Stoneheart could find out that. Would she ever warm to him? I think that's an entirely different matter. I think there's one thing, accepting the fact that maybe this person isn't what you thought, and actually warming to them and thinking, oh, actually, yeah, they're a really nice guy. That's a different thing. And whether she's now capable, as Lady Stoneheart, whether she's now capable of any remorse is a completely different matter. Hi, Robert. Joel Faulkner saying, hi, Robert. George really phoned it in with the names of the historical Tullys, but which name is the most embarrassing? So, yeah, for those who've missed this, George R. R. Martin, he quite likes dropping, as we know, doing little homages to people in the names of his wider world. And there's plenty of examples everywhere. House Tully is one of the more noticeable examples. So he introduced, just mentioned in The World of Ice and Fire, when this was written, just a history of Westeros, he sort of introduces the Tullys who were around during the time of the Dance of the Dragons, which include Oscar and Kermit and Grover Tully. Now, yes, this is intentional on his part. Yes, it's just his sense of humor. He has sometimes quite a little sort of puckish sense of humor about him, and he likes that kind of stuff. Of them, I think Kermit is probably the most, for me, the most amusing. I don't know whether he finds it embarrassing. I have no evidence for this, but I do wonder whether he perhaps regretted that decision when he decided to write more about the Dance of the Dragons. And it's like, oh, and this built up into Fire and Blood, and then obviously we've got House of the Dragon afterwards, and suddenly from being just a sort of a throwaway, oh, here's some amusing names in the history of this house, this becomes, these people were around during one of the most significant moments of history. I do wonder whether he, if not regrets it, I don't know if I've got a question about this yet, coming up later, but he does noticeably with House Tully and the Dance of the Dragons, he keeps them out of it for quite a while. And I wonder whether that's just him not wanting Kermit and Oscar and Grover to be at the center of this because people might not take it seriously. So what happens is that Grover Tully, who was the Lord at the time, is a very old Lord, and he wants to side with the Greens, but his grandson and his great-grandson, Oscar and Kermit, they want to side with the Blacks, and so the house gets caught up in inaction for a year or so, and so we don't really see much of them. They do eventually come out to play, so to speak, but it's I do wonder whether he, of all of his little homages, this is the one that he goes, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that there. Let's go to question from Simon D. How do you think Jaime will react to Lady Stoneheart? Lannisters aren't exactly known for their belief in Grumpkins and Snarks, so I imagine it will be quite the shock. Maybe even life-changing. Yeah, so this is I think, fascinating, because we've got, we know what happened was that Jamie, he was at Pennytree, and Brienne comes to him and basically says, "Follow me." And so he heads off, and she is taking him to meet Lady Stoneheart. Now, how that encounter is going to go down is going to be one of the most fascinating things in the first few chapters of The Winds of Winter, I'm absolutely certain. But how he will react, I think, initially the same way everyone else reacts. Everybody seems to have the same initial reaction to Lady Stoneheart, in horror, shock and horror. The thing is that you could, if you wanted to not believe in the supernatural, you could sort of say, well, okay, I thought she was dead, but obviously they didn't double check. They put her they threw her into the river they didn't bury her or burn her, and then she washed up and she got saved. You could kind of try and rationalize it, despite everybody saying, "Oh no, this is definitely magic. This is the Lord of Light. This is the Lord." If you wish to rationalize it, you can. I suspect that this will be just the next step in Jamie's slow. He's got this very slow kind of character arc, which is taking. He's been taken away from his family, and he's been turning his back on his family. But now it's his attitude towards the world, that his arrogance, his feeling that he understands everything and everyone owes him stuff, that now needs to be changed. And I think this will be an important part of it, is that he will see her, and perhaps it will start to challenge his understanding of the world. But more importantly, she is basically going to put him on trial. Whether it's as straightforward as that or not, we don't know. But the amount of things that she might say that he's responsible for is absolutely huge. Let's not forget that one of the last things that Catelyn Stark heard before she died was Jaime Lannister sends his regards at the Red Wedding, which probably will mean that she thinks that he's in some way behind all of this. Now, he wasn't. He didn't know anything about this. This was Roose Bolton, who had the potential. Actually, if you have a look at Roose Bolton's master plan, a video I did ages ago, this probably explains it better than I will right now. But Jamie and Brienne, they're heading down to King's Landing. Cat had set him free, and they come across Harrenhal, or they get captured and taken to Harrenhal. And Roose Bolton's got a problem because he's in the middle of switching sides, and here's Jamie. He can't send Jamie back to Robb Stark or Team Stark, because he's about to change sides, and there's no way he can let Tywin think that he's his son. He's just giving up his son back to the Stark, so he has to send Jamie on. However, his lieutenant Varga Hoat basically has cut off Jamie's hand, and now he's got a problem that he doesn't want to be sending Jamie down mutilated to Tywin Lannister and have Tywin hold him responsible for it. So Roose is in quite a tricky situation, and they have this very kind of nuanced conversation that Brienne seems not to pick up on all of the detail of what's going on there, but Jamie understands. And basically, Roose sends him on his way and says, "Send my regards to your father, to Tywin," which Jamie understands, at least in outline, why this is. And Jamie says, "I will, if you send my regards to your boss, to Robb Stark." And so that's why, on the TV show, I think it was just the Lannisters send their regards, but this got personalized. Roose Bolton found it quite amusing, I suspect, to be Jaime Lannister sends his regards. So that's going to be the last thing, pretty much, that she hears before she dies. So Lady Stoneheart will probably remember that as well. So he'll have to explain that. He'll have to explain the fact that she had sent him down to go and basically release her daughters, Aya and Sansa, and he had not. He handed this quest over to Brienne, but he, from her perspective, he had not fulfilled his side of the bargain. Then, of course, we get all of the pushing Bran out of a window stuff. There's a lot for him to answer to. So I think that there will be initial horror and revulsion, but it will very quickly be replaced by Jaime trying to frantically save his own skin somehow, because she has shown, Lady Stoneheart has shown, that she's quite willing to pronounce judgment and just kill people. If I had to guess, I mean, I think Brienne will come out to support him. I think she'll show Oathkeeper. She'll show that he passed that onto her, this trying to find Lady Stoneheart's daughters, Catelyn's daughters, and that was him. That's why she's got the sword, and so they can verify each other's stories. But the more I sort of have been digging into this tangle of the Riverlands, and I've said many times that the Riverlands, I think, is the most complex set of interrelated storylines that we have at the moment in A Song of Ice and Fire. If George R. R. Martin is getting stuck with trying to work out who meets who when, which he has done in the past, and therefore what that means for the wider story, it's the Riverlands is, I think, probably the biggest problem there, because there are so many different groups. What's Blackfish going to do? What about the garrison there, Riverrun? What about Lady Stoneheart, Jaime and Brienne? What about the super pack of wolves that's there? The Brotherhood without banners more broadly? What about the splinter group off from the Brotherhood without banners? What about the remnants of the different groups from the Brave Companions? What about Sandor Clegane? All of these different groups, if they meet in different orders, they're what will happen might change hugely. But I've started to come to this idea that perhaps what Jaime can offer is a way into Riverrun. We were looking, perhaps it was last week, I can't remember, and mentioned briefly Devon Lannister, who is he's Warden of the West now. He's quite an important Lannister these days, and he has to marry a Frey. And he's been told he has to marry a Frey. Where is he going to do that? Well, in Riverrun. And so a whole load of Freys are going to come down to Riverrun, and there's going to be a wedding. And we've already had a little bit of perhaps foreshadowing when Jaime says, are you going to go through with it? You should go through with it. And he says, yeah, don't worry. I remember what happened to Robb Stark. Which he obviously at that time meant, I remember what happened to Robb Stark, because he didn't go through with his wedding, his engagement to a Frey. I'm not going to fall for the same thing. That's how he meant it. But the way that it comes across to us is, the Red Wedding. The Red Wedding could happen. We've been wondering whether there's going to be a Red Wedding 2.0. If there is, I suspect it's going to be at Riverrun, at Devon Lannister's wedding. Jaime could turn up. He would be expected to be there, and he could do the equivalent of open the front door and let the Brotherhood without banners in, and they can be taking out all the Freys that they want, and in vengeance for the Red Wedding. And any who escape, we have a super pack of wolves waiting outside in the Riverlands. So that, if I had to guess, that's what's going to be happening next on that particular kind of strand. Saga Genesis Evangeli. saying IDG enriches my experience with the Song of Ice and Fire greatly. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Username redacted. What was House Tully like under Harren the Black? Loyal until they weren't. We don't have huge amounts of information. They weren't one of the big houses. They were quite a big house in the Riverlands, but not one of the top 5 or 6, say. So they, once it became apparent that Harren the Black was now in charge, they basically bent the knee to him and stayed loyal until the Targaryens arrived, at which point they turned against them. So we don't. I mean, I'd love to say more, but George R. R. Martin simply has not told us more, and I think that this is because they did just keep their heads down. They weren't wanting to get involved in huge amounts. They figured out who was the most powerful, and then they stuck with it. Whitney saying, "Hi, Robert. Hi there. I'm reading A Storm of Swords and have finally reached the end where Lysa says to Sansa that as a young woman, she snuck into Peter Baelish's room and slept with him when he thought she was her sister Cat. We also uncover from Cat's POV how Lysa was given Tansy tea by Hoster to rid her of the child she conceived. And we know its lasting consequences of infertility for her. She struggled for years as the wife of old Jon Arryn to have children, as Jon Arryn was also infertile. Could Littlefinger be Robert Arryn's father? They were in King's Landing together for years and have likely carried on some sort of relationship, as Littlefinger was very aware of her feelings for him and used that to his advantage and manipulated her into killing Jon Arryn. What are your thoughts?" Okay, well, this is an interesting one, because it's been a long-held suspicion within the fandom without any real evidence. So Jon Arryn had been married twice before his marriage to Lysa Arryn, and neither of those marriages had any children. He was an older gentleman. He wasn't so old that he could no longer have children on his deathbed, but he was significantly older than her. So this is not a huge surprise that it took them a long time to have a child. Might it be Peter Baelish's? Well, the opportunity was there, I guess, in as much as Lysa Arryn and Jon Arryn came down to King's Landing. Jon Arryn was Hand of the King. At some point later into that, Peter Baelish also came to King's Landing. He became Master of Coin and obviously will have been close to Lysa. Now, does that mean that they had an affair then and there and that Robert Arryn is his son? I mean, there's no evidence for it. There's nowhere where they sort of say, "and our son, Robin," or anything like that, when they're sort of alone together. We don't hear that through Sansa. We see this through Sansa's perspective, of course. You look at the physical description of him, and there's nothing there. I mean, he doesn't really kind of fit either of his parents, but nor does he really fit Peter Baelish. Peter Baelish was quite a scrawny little child, we're told, and obviously Robin Arryn is as well. But Lysa Arryn seems to have been probably a lot thinner than she was when she was younger. She had put on a lot of weight. Cat notes. So there's nothing conclusive there. There's nothing conclusive, I think, in the way that Littlefinger treats him. He doesn't. Yeah, he's sort of affectionate-ish towards him, but not in a way that makes you think, "Oh, this guy, this is clearly his son, and he cares for him, and he's doing everything for him." That doesn't ever. We don't ever get that vibe. And then one other scene that we get rather awkwardly from Sansa's POV is when Peter Baelish, when Littlefinger takes her to the Vale, he smuggles her out of King's Landing, and they land basically at his old castle's the wrong way of saying it. In the Fingers, his old sort of strong house, I think is probably the best way of saying it. It's not described as very nice at all. The home of House Baelish. Anyway, Lysa Arryn comes out there, and she basically says, "We're getting married." And then we overhear her, first of all, saying what she is going to be doing with Littlefinger for the rest of that night. And then Sansa hears what they were doing for the rest of that night. And because it's not a massive building, and Lysa Arryn is quite loud. So the impression we got from that, though again it's not conclusive, is that this is something which has been pent up for a very long time, for Lysa Arryn at least. So there's no conclusive evidence either way, it has to be said. So I think it's just a matter of what you think works. My instinct is probably this is Jon Arryn's, if only because we haven't had any clues. There's no real foreshadowing that we've sort of seen. There's nothing when Lysa is just scarily honest when she's with Littlefinger, and also with Sansa, and she's she never says anything even remotely. And our child Robin, that she doesn't ever, Robert Arryn, she never says anything like that. So yes, I could see why you might think that, but at the moment it's an argument from, I wouldn't say from silence, but it's an argument based on just a feeling that perhaps could have happened. Shelley J saying, doesn't Littlefinger plan to get rid of Robin when the time is right? I thought he said that to Sansa. Of course, he may not know Robin is his son. Yeah, he may not know. This is another thing, but and Wheezy Squeezebox saying narcissists don't really care about their offspring, i.e. Cersei and Tommen. Well, Cersei does care about her children, but only really in as much as she cares about herself, and they are an extension of her. Right, so let's go to Reflective Rambling. Are you off? Great to see you, though. Let's go to a question from Raven's Oath, saying, good evening, Robert. Did the Tullys not attend the tourney at Harrenhal? We have plenty of narrative about the known events that happened or didn't happen from Kat's point of view, yet it is all second-hand. Kat would have met Ned there, but didn't until their wedding. The Blackfish was a famous knight, but isn't mentioned. Furthermore, Kat's mum was a Went, along with the fact that they are the Riverlords, so they should have been in a high honour or centre stage. Did the Tullys think the Wents were pushing to out them as Riverlords? Okay, so this is again another interesting one. So it's true, we have no mention of the Tullys being at the tourney at Harrenhal, and there are certainly a few kind of like anecdotal things that you can point at to say, well, that you would expect this if they were there. So, for example, Kat says that she had not seen Ned until it was time to marry him. Ned was at the tourney at Harrenhal. If she had been there, given the fact that she was engaged to Ned's brother, you would have thought that probably she would have seen him there. So that implies that she at least probably wasn't there. Yes, they are the Lords Paramount of the Riverlands, and Hoster Tully had been married to a Went. We don't know exactly what the family relation there is, incidentally, with the Wents, but you would have thought that there would have been some kind of mention of that somewhere along the way, but there isn't. We get this from the story that the Reed children that they got from their father Howland tell to Bran, and also we get reflections from Sir Barristan, and also a few other odds and ends. Ned sort of vaguely thinks about things, but we don't have, it has to be said, like a full list of everyone who was there. We don't have an outcome of every single joust. We don't have anything like that. So it is possible that they were there, we're just not told about it. That's the first possibility. I think there's three broad possibilities here. The first possibility is that. The second is that there is some reason that we don't know about, which it could be, as you say, that they think that there's the Wents are out to get them or something. There's no hint of that anywhere, but maybe George R. Martin has got a wide world, and he could very easily just add in a bit of extra information for us and go, oh yes, at this time there was some great problem between the Wents, and he could come out with that later. Similarly, maybe we know that Hoster's wife died in childbirth at some point. Could it have been then? Could he have been in mourning and kept his family in mourning? Again, it's possible. We don't know, but it's possible. But the third reason, and the reason which seems most likely, is the fact that they deliberately weren't there. Now, we know that what the plan had been, Hoster was trying to get good marriages for his children. He was a political mover. He'd got Cat to be engaged to Brandon Stark, and he also wanted Lysa to have a good marriage. And he and Tywin Lannister had got this plan that they were going to get Jaime and Lysa Arryn married. They were going to get those two together. Now, they did try that. Tywin basically sent Jaime up to River Run, and Hoster deliberately put the two of them together next to each other for, I can't remember how long it was, a week or two. But Jaime basically ignored Lysa Arryn and instead talked, we're told he talked to the Blackfish, Brynden, about war things and stuff like that. Jaime obviously was madly in love with Cersei and didn't want to marry anyone. So he probably knew what was going on and deliberately tried to make it not happen. But still, their wishes were probably not paramount in this, and the plan was that those two would marry. So why is that important? How does that relate to the turning at Harrenhal? Because at the same time as all of this is going on, we get Aerys II, the Mad King, is paranoid about lots of things, but one of the things he's paranoid about is with Tywin, and he starts getting a bit petty as well with him. And one thing that he does is he makes Jaime, he promotes him to the Kingsguard. It's actually formally done at the tourney, but it's kind of announced beforehand. And this was, Tywin took this as the snub. This is a massive snub, because not only is this like ruining his wedding plans, but Jaime was his heir. Jaime was the person he wanted to leave Casterly Rock to, and if Jaime joined the Kingsguard, then he couldn't marry and he had to disown all of his inheritances. And what did that mean? Well, that meant that Tywin would have to leave it to Tyrion, and Tywin did not wish to leave it to Tyrion. So this was a huge issue. And he was so angry. Tywin did not attend the tourney at Harrenhal, we're told, because he was so angry about this. Might Hoster have similarly been angry if he had thought that he had got this match for his daughter, his younger daughter? And this, let's not forget, that was a very good match. This is his younger daughter marrying the eldest son of the richest family in Westeros. So he would have got his children, so her children, his grandchildren would have sat as lords of the Lannisters, as well as through his other daughter, they would have sat as lords of the North. And his son would be lord of the Riverlands, and basically his children would then be and grandchildren would be ruling 3 of the 7 kingdoms. That was Hoster's master plan, and Aerys II scuppered it. So perhaps that's why we don't see House Tully there. Perhaps he was just, in the same way that Tywin was protesting, he also protested. Okay, let's go to a question from Alison. Hello, Robert. Hi there. Is there any significance to Cat and Ned's children all looking like Tullys, except Jon and Arya? Thank you for the wonderful content. I really enjoyed the remake of the Qyburn video. Good. Well, I'm glad you did. I mean, this is something I'm sort of doing on and off every now and then, is going back to some old videos and redoing them in the light of new information we have, as well as making hopefully slightly better quality videos. Some of the audio on some of the old ones isn't as good. Some of the visuals aren't as good. So yeah, every now and then I'm dropping in a sort of a redone version of an old video, and I did quite enjoy that Qyburn one. Anyway, the question here is there a significance to Cat and Ned's children looking like Tullys, except for Jon and Arya? And they do. We didn't really see this on the TV show, but it's mentioned quite a lot in the books. So Rob, for example, has got the auburn hair, which is very much a Tully look. We know, obviously, we have Sansa with the red hair. Also, Rickon does. We get 2 characters, Arya and Jon, who don't, both of whom are described as being typically Stark looking, which is the grey eyes, the slightly sort of long face, dark hair. That's the kind of the typical Stark look. Now, is this deliberate on George R. R. Martin's part? I think the answer has to be yes, because so much is made in book 1 of all of these different families. This is a major plot point, is that these families, there is a look which passes down generation to generation. We know what Targaryens look like. We know what Lannisters look like. We know what Baratheons look like. We know what Tullys. We know all of these different things. And here we have the central family in this story. Certainly in book 1, we get so much of it from their perspective. The central family, that seems not to be the case. Why is that? Well, partly, I suspect, to show this link across to the Tullys, and because they're going to join forces, the North and the Riverlands. It's not just like, oh, there's a bit of a family connection. This is a very strong connection between the North and the Riverlands. I think he wished to play that up. But I think there's also there's a bit here that I think he was trying to show, which is Arya is often compared to Lyanna. She, in terms of her horsemanship, in terms of her looks, in terms of her character, Ned thinks that she looks like her. Roose Bolton compares the two of them. Arya is often compared to Lyanna Stark. And who is the other one of those siblings, in inverted commas, that looks like her? It's Jon. And so this is a soft hint, I think, right from the beginning, that Arya looks like Lyanna. Jon looks like Arya. Jon looks like Lyanna. That's just a kind of a, even though Kat's there thinking, oh, he looks all Starkish, he's taking this from Ned, he's getting this from Ned. actually what we're looking at here is, yeah, he's got Stark looks, but a little reminder, there was another Stark around. In fact, more than one other Stark around. So he could look not like John, but like not like Ned, but like Ned's sister. Let's go to Andrew K saying, imagine being briefly betrothed to Jaime Lannister to ending up with Jon Arryn. Yeah, it's and also being madly in love with Littlefinger. I mean, that's quite a triumvirate going on there, isn't it? I mean, I don't think, just to clarify, Lysa Arryn was never technically betrothed to Jaime. This was just the plan that they had. This was what was going to happen. Let's go to a question from Maura Lee. Hi there, Maura, saying, hope you and Dan the dog are well. We are, thank you. I'm most curious about the fate of Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, and what his fate will be in the next 2 books. Will he join Stannis' army? Will he reunite with Lady Stoneheart? Potentially do some more damage in the Riverlands? So this, I'm going to build on, I gave an answer quite early on in this live streams in the chat. Sort of setting out the options, and the Blackfish, he swam out from the Rivergate, effectively, of Riverrun, and he's now somewhere in the Riverlands. Where does he go? He could go north. He could have discovered that the new king that he should be following is Jon. Maybe he's gone north. He could go east, back to, this is where his home had been for 15 years, to the Eyrie. I think that the most likely thing is to go back to what was the order he was given by Robb. What was he told? He was told to keep Riverrun, and he was told to protect Queen Jane, Robb's wife. I think that we know that he's a man of honor, and we know that he's a man of family honor, duty, or family, duty, honor. That's what drives him. His duty is to give up Riverrun. He has to give up Riverrun because Edmure basically has ordered him to. So he has to do that. But there is one other thing that he has not been told has changed. He still has this duty, and his honor is dependent on him protecting Jane Westerling. So what are we expecting? Well, he, I think, will quite easily be able to find his garrison from Riverrun who've been set free. And I think that he will learn from Edmure. Edmure knows that he's going to be sent off west. Jane Westerling's also presumably going to be sent off west. He will try to intercept that. And how this ties in, I think, is we have had a hint. In fact, it's not even a hint from George R. R. Martin. 10 years ago, before, or back in the time when he used to be happy every now and then to be telling us a few things that was going to be happening in the Winds of Winter and answering questions from people. He's quite tight-lipped these days. But he was asked about Jane Westerling. And this is what he says. He says, Jane Westerling is still alive and will be seen in the prologue of the Winds of Winter. He clarifies, not necessarily from her perspective, not from her POV, but she will be seen in the prologue. Now, what does that mean? That means I think that the prologue is probably her in this caravan or train or something, sort of being marched from Riverrun westwards towards the river, towards the Westerlands. Now, if this is from her, if not maybe from her POV, but maybe from somebody else in that group, then I think the prologue could well be the Blackfish trying to fulfill his oath, his duty to be protecting her by releasing her, by getting her away from the clutches of the Lannisters. So that could be it. Now, the prologues tend to be quite bloody. Let's put it that way. The prologues, the POV character from the prologue always dies. Let's put that another way, in A Song of Ice and Fire. And if you want a little bit of tragedy, if you think, hey, how do we open The Winds of Winter? Let's open it with something absolutely heartbreaking. Jane Westerling, who married seemingly for love, and then lost her husband and is now being marched off into the west. She has been sent with some Lannister soldiers who've been given a secret order from Jaime. So nobody knows what the secret order is, but we know what the secret order is, which is that if there's any attempt to escape, they are to kill her. Jaime is very practical and pragmatic about this, ruthless even. The whole, this is actually him being showing some mercy and not killing her straight away. She is a symbol. She is the queen. She is the widow of the dead king of the north. He could have just killed her straight away. He's also very aware of the fact that there's still an outside chance that either she could be pregnant or somebody could claim that she was pregnant, and then her child would then be the heir, and then this child would be a new figurehead. Now, that's almost certainly, I'm not going to go into all of the logistics of this, but almost certainly that's not going to happen, in as much as her mother seems to have been feeding her tea to make sure that she does not get pregnant. But the perspective that Jaime has on this is that he will keep her alive if he can, but if he can't, she's gone. She has to die. He will just order, and that's why they've been given the secret order. That there is no way on this planet he will allow her to escape. There is no way on this planet he will allow anyone to rescue her. The guards have been told your first thing to do is turn around and just kill her. So, prologue to The Winds of Winter. Sorry to depress your day. I think that there's a good chance that what we're going to see is Jane Westerling heading west. Some people, probably the Blackfish, trying to rescue her, and her being killed. That's where that seems to be ending up. Maura Lee, hi there, Maura. Very generous, thank you so much. Saying, just a show of love and support. You're the best and very appreciated. Well, I hugely appreciate you and your support as well. Let's go to a question connected to this, I guess. Dr. Debunk, will the Blackfish recognize Lady Stoneheart as his niece Cat, or consider her an abomination or demon to be destroyed? How will Stoneheart potentially react to Robb Stark's widow, Jane Westerling, even when they cross paths? What will Stoneheart do to Jaime Lannister? That bit I think we've already covered. But how would he react? I mean, I think that how the Blackfish will react to Lady Stoneheart, we don't know. But again, I think he would see her as family. And he doesn't seem to be an overly religious man. So the idea that he sees her as some sort of demon or something like that, I don't think that seems to be where he's at. He might potentially at some point think she needs to be given rest. She needs to be freed from this. I could certainly see that. But I don't think it's going to be like one look, and it's like, no, she has to be. We must rid the world of this foul travesty or anything like that. I don't think that's really where he's going to go. Will he recognize her? Yeah, I think absolutely. And how would she respond to Jane Westerling? Well, I think there's a fair to middling chance that she will never meet Jane Westerling. But she had a sort of a slightly weird kind of relationship with Jane Westerling, it has to be said, in that she clearly loves her son. She thinks that Rob made a huge mistake in marrying Jane Westerling, and she's right in that. I think, politically speaking, let's not break any. Let's not sort of beat around the bush on that one. She is always written by George R. Martin as being politically quite clever and understanding what's going on. She understood what this meant. So she has that as a problem going in. She sees this as a problem going forward because she sees that the presence of Jane Westerling and Jane Westerling's family as well is causing problems within the alliance of all the people who support Rob. And she seems to sort of get on with her and kind of understand why Rob might have married her. But at the same time, you'd be hard pressed to say that they were close. So she will definitely want to, as family, she will definitely want Jane Westerling to be safe and to be saved. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But that's not the big thing that drives her. The big thing that drives her is her own children and revenge. Nath Drum, thank you very much for the super sticker, saying thanks. Thank you very much. Andrew K saying, I don't know about love, more like taking advantage of a physically and emotionally broken Rob. Well, he was definitely physically and emotionally broken. Wheezy Squeezebox saying, good heartbreaking opening scene. Yeah, I could see that. We've been waiting for however many years, and then suddenly it does arrive, and that's the first scene. That would be pretty horrible, wouldn't it? But it's entirely possible. Eldrick Stoneskin saying, the Ironborn and the Tullys believe they go down beneath the water to hold eternal court after death. Could the Tullys have worshipped the drowned god in the past? Well, it's an interesting one. I do have a question. Let's see whether I can find it from one of my patrons linked to this. Not sure if I can. Anyway, oh yeah, here we go. Brandy 1842. Hello, Robert. House Tully's funeral rites seem to have a very peculiar connection to the Lovecraftian Innsmouth Deep Ones. Those who die go down to meet with their fathers, that sort of thing. Is there a connection to the Ironborn and in turn to the Deep Ones? Okay, so might there be a connection between the Tullys and the Ironborn? Well, there are certainly echoes here. And because there's water, obviously, the Tullys, this is to do with the river as opposed to the open sea, which is where the Ironborn are. They seem culturally very different, but it's noticeable that the Tullys are first men, descended from the first men, and very probably the Ironborn, they claim that they came up out of the sea themselves and stuff like that, but they almost certainly are first men themselves. Might there be therefore some kind of connection with, we often talk about the Deep Ones or the drowned god, the god under the water. I think that ish, as in echoes, but the big difference is that there is a clear religious aspect to the Ironborn here. It's the drowned god. You're going down to there to meet your descendants in, and but this is because this is where the god is. The Tullys don't have that. This is just a You're going to the river. This is where your ancestors are from, and they all go to the river, kind of thing. In the same way that the Starks would have, we all bury all of our family down here, where all of the family go, and the Targaryens, all of our family get burned. The bodies get burned. It feels more like this is just the tradition of how we do it now. Perhaps because it is a long time, in the 1,000 years or so, or even longer, since the Andals were there, and they moved across to a new religion, away from, we think, the old gods. Maybe before that, maybe it wasn't just the old gods that they worshipped. Maybe there was some kind of specifically river god element to this that they got rid of when they started worshipping the first men. Maybe what we're seeing is just some cultural bit of that has survived where the religious aspect hasn't. But I think what I'm saying is that here you can see the echoes, but there's no strong, clear link. If there is a link, this is thousands of years in the past. It's not that they are connected now. It's that maybe way back in the past, there's some kind of common denominator. Maybe some of the first men in one particular group headed off to the west across the water to the Iron Islands, and some stayed at River Run. Maybe. Interesting though, when you get Brandy 1814 talking about the Lovecraftian Innsmouth deep ones, I shall use this as just an opportunity to remind people, or tell people if you don't know, I've got another channel where I do audio narration of great fantasy and science fiction books. So I've got plenty of Lovecraft on there. At the moment, you will find, this is another channel I've got. It's also a podcast if you prefer podcasts. Currently going through Dracula. I have just this morning, I've been recording another Conan story. After that, coming up in a few weeks' time, keep an eye out for 1984, George Orwell, absolute classic. I'm really looking forward to that. So if you like classic science fiction and fantasy, or if you just think, hey, I've never actually read that, do go and check it out, The Well-Told Tale. As I'm pausing for this kind of thing, patrons, thank you. I always try and thank you every live stream. I cannot do what I do without your support, so I hugely appreciate it. Thank you so much. And also, and if you want to support the channel, Patreon is the best way to do it. There's a link probably down in the description. And moderators, always have to thank you as well, because you are the best moderators in the entire world. If you are here watching live, then please show the moderators a little bit of love, because they are amazing. Okay, let's go to, I think I've got some more questions here in the chat somewhere. DM Collins saying, any thought to reviving the Traveller's Guide series? So many locations not yet covered. Summer Isles, Lonely Light, the Weary Traveller, in my imagination, is a Tully. So this question is relevant. Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought that people would take would decide on who the Weary Traveller was. Yeah, for those who don't know what this is, I did ages ago on this channel. I did The Traveller's Guide to Westeros and then Essos, where I tried to show the history and also the feel of a place through the perspective of a traveller going somewhere. So what does King's Landing smell like? What does it feel like? Is it hot? Is it what's the ambience like down in Flea Bottom? How does that change when you go up onto this hill or that hill? That's the kind of feel that I was going for. I'm actually probably going to announce this maybe next week, but I've decided what I'm going to do. These are some of those videos. As I said, I'm trying to go through some of my old videos and update them, redo them. I did those videos a long time ago, and since then we've had Fire and Blood, we've had House of the Dragon, we've probably had a few other things I can't even think of now. There's a whole load of new stuff I'd love to talk about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to redo the Traveller's Guide. This is how I was going to announce this next time. And I'm going to do it initially, at least, releasing for my patrons. So that's just, I will formally announce this in a bit. And I will try and do it in a slightly different format, perhaps. rather than in short 5-minute things. Bring them all together. But that's the plan. So in answer to what you were saying there about, is there any chance that we can do some more locations? Yes, absolutely. That was one of the other things that having looked back at it, I thought, I didn't ever go to the Summer Isles. I think there were some places like the Fist of the First Men that we didn't get to north of the Wall. So there's I don't think we went to Fair Isle, for example, which we read a lot about in Fire and Blood. So now there's a lot more to talk about. So yes, new, expanded, hopefully better version of the Traveller's Guide coming soon. Initially, at least 2 patrons. So I hope that's as exciting for you as it is for me. Martin S. How long has House Tully been allied with House Stark? Well, not very long. Mostly because House Stark largely kept to the north. Now, they will have known each other because once the Targaryens invaded, obviously they will know about all of the noble families around there, and they are the next big Lord Paramount to the north. So yes, they certainly were never really at loggerheads one with another. But the first proper alliance actually generally did come with Rickard Stark with his Southerland ambitions and Hoster Tully with his desire to get lots of advantageous marriages for his family. That's another video at some point. I will do the Southerland Ambitions video. I'd love to redo that at some point. I've had new thoughts on that, but so many ideas. This is the problem. I have too many ideas for videos, not just old ones, but new ones. I keep on coming up with new videos. Too many ideas, too little time. But we will get through them all. Do not worry. So how long? Not very is the short answer on that one. Charis Ballerina. In order to free Jaime, Tyrion sends a thief or lockpick, a poisoner, a mummer/impressionist, and a murderer/brute to Riverrun. Who was he going to poison? I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I don't think I've broken this down in my mind in any great detail. The idea to free Jaime, who would you poison? Well, sometime the person on the guard, outside the room that he's in. I think the thing, what we have, if you're trying to get somebody to be able to escape from afar, you don't know the exact situation they're in. What you can do is send people with highly specialized skill set, or whatever it is that Liam Neeson says. You send the people with the right skill set into to there, and then get them to figure it out. So it's not like Tyrion was there micromanaging how something would be done. It's him sending the right people. Commander Ray saying, Robert, how did the Tullys manage their vassals despite several having larger armies or more gold? Well, I think it's an interesting question, but it depends on what you mean by managed. There was never any possibility of them being overturned, of having somebody else be Lords Paramount, because the Targaryens had the Tullys back. So that's the first thing. So that the relative position was not going to be changed. But in terms of getting them on side, I think the blunt answer is they didn't always manage it. You could go back and have a look through the Targaryen reign and rule, and we've already mentioned how they kind of shift a little bit. It's not. We were sort of looking down a bit on House Frey for doing something relatively similar, but they do change sides quite a few times. And not everyone comes with them. It's noticeable in the Dance of the Dragons that not everyone is on their side. It's noticeable not all of the Riverlands lords are on the side that House Tully pick. They can't take everyone with them. Unlike the North, where everyone in the North goes with what the Starks want, for example. Then in Robert's Rebellion, it's very noticeable that although, yes, they do, I think, the vast majority, if not all, of the lords come along with them, House Frey, they just don't get involved. They turn up too late. The late House Frey, they get told you have to be here for this battle, and then they turn up only when the battle is finished, because they just didn't want to get involved in it, and they wanted to be able to join the side that won. That was House Frey being openly insubordinate, but they got away with it because the Tullys didn't have the power to do anything about it. So the answer to the question is, most of the time it didn't matter. Most of the time people went along with it because that was the status quo. But on a surprisingly large amount of times, then the other people pushed back. A lot of love for the Traveller's Guide. That's really kind. Thank you. Michelle Rimo saying you're heading off. Great to see you. That's having a quick flick through the chat. A lot of love for the Traveller's Guide. Thank you very much, people. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to going back through that and hopefully adding in some extra stuff. Let's go to another question from... where did we get to? Stephen saying, hi, Robert. Could you give us your thoughts on Brynden Blackfish and his refusal to marry? I understand that this has been a subject of quite a bit of fan speculation. Are there any theories that you find particularly intriguing? If he refused to marry because he was in love with another person, any guesses on who they might be? It seems to me that he would have been an ideal and obvious candidate for the Kingsguard. He was a renowned knight and an unmarried second son, and joining would have been an honour for House Tully and a way for him and Hoster to amicably part ways. Yet it never even happened, not even when Robert became king. Is there a reason why he was not offered a place? Or if he was, a reason for him to refuse? Or am I just wearing tinfoil? Well, you're not wearing tinfoil. No, it was definitely... It would have made sense in many ways. So there's two parts there. There's the why not the Kingsguard, and there's the why not marry. Let's do the Kingsguard bit first. The Kingsguard, I think there's two answers to this. The first is timing. He had decided to go with Lysa Arryn, as she then was, when she went over to the Vale. He went with her, and that was pretty much straight after the war, and so he'd already accepted a job by that point. He'd already been almost disowned, not officially disowned, but Hoster had basically seen his refusal to marry as a refusal to accept what his lord, his brother, but also his lord, had told him to do. And he basically said, we don't get the exact words, but you're dead to me. You're gone. And so it not bringing honor, he thought, to the family. He did think of him as a black goat, a black sheep, a black fish. That's what he saw him as. So that's part of that reason. The other part of that reason is that the creation of the King Robert Baratheon's Kingsguard was a political decision as much as anything else. There were two in there already, Jaime, obviously, and Sir Barristan. The other five, they'd all been killed in Robert's Rebellion and had to be replaced, and they were replaced by Lannister picks as much as anything else. Robert Baratheon didn't really care. One of them, Boris Blount, this came from John Arryn, but it seems that very quickly after becoming king, Robert Baratheon stopped really caring. We know that he was a great conqueror, but terrible ruler, and he just wanted to get drunk and fool around, and that's what he did. And so it wasn't really a thing that he was thinking, well, how do I, his brain did not go straight to how do I politically get all of these people on side? What's the best thing? How do I help out that family? That's not how he thought. He thought, I want to go hunting. I want a tourney, and bring on the dancing girls. That was his thinking. The first part, though, why didn't he marry? Well, we're not told. And George R. R. Martin was, having said an answer to an earlier question about that wonderful time when sometimes he would answer fans' questions, that he was asked directly about this. Could he shed any light? He was asked, could he shed any light on why the Blackfish refused to marry? And George R. R. Martin gave a one-word answer, which was nope. Now, I wasn't there. I don't know how he said it. I don't know the context. Other than here's the question, and that's the answer. Did he mean nope? I can't shed any light on it because I haven't actually thought about that myself. It's just one of those things. Or nope, I'm not telling you because that would give something away. So we don't know that, but he has openly refused to say any more. So we can just speculate, I guess. A fan theory is that he's gay, which is possible. Another fan theory is that he maybe was in love with someone else, which again is possible. But neither of those things have we seen any evidence of elsewhere. We've not seen him or anyone around him talking about, and there was that lost love he had, or he's, in the way the Maesters often sort of say, he had a close personal friend or something like that. There's no hint of anything along those lines. So if I had to guess, it sounds boring, but it might be as simple as he just didn't want to marry. He liked being on his own. He was maybe what today they wouldn't use those terms, I'm sure, then, but maybe he was asexual. Maybe he was aromantic. Maybe he just didn't want to. And unlike most people in that time who had to, in his class, who had to do what they were told, he was a strong enough character and he just said, nope. That's what we see from him. He just decides he does what he wants to do and what he thinks is right. And so maybe it's simply that he is one of the few characters in this world who has got enough self-confidence and belief to just say, nope, I don't want to, therefore I'm not going to. One other thing, sort of to kind of soft evidence, I guess, to back that up, but it's very noticeable when you're looking for it, at least, that when we see him in the Vale, Cat arrives. He's there. He's got a good job in the Vale, and he's been there a decade and a half by this point. He's the guardian of the gate. He's guarding the way into the Vale. It's very high responsibility, this job, and he then accompanies Cat up all the way up to the Eyrie. She explains everything that's going on. There's a problem that's brewing. Here's Tyrion, by the way. I think he probably tried to kill Bran. And Lysa Arryn says, yes, and he tried to kill, and he killed my husband. And they explain there's going to be a war, and the Riverlands are in trouble, and we really should go back to see, Hoster. And Lysa's, nope, we're not going anywhere. I'm staying here. The Vale is staying out of this conflict. Nobody can get me. I'm in this impregnable castle. That's just sheet blankets. And the Blackfish sort of basically turns to Cat and says, I'll come with you. I'll come. Yes, I've got this job and responsibility here, but at heart, I'm a Tully. so I'm coming with you. And what is noticeable when you look is he doesn't say, I just want to say goodbye to someone, or I need to just give me a couple of hours. I just want to write a note to someone. I want to see my friends just before we go. I'm off to war. He doesn't do any of that. He seems to just drop all kind of human contact there and just say, right, I'm off. And that strikes me as just probably showing us a huge amount about his character, because he'd done that before. Effectively, he'd gone with Lysa Arryn. He'd left Riverrun and everybody that he knew in the entire world and went with Lysa Arryn over to the Eyrie. But it's not that he was then her companion and hung around with her. She was up at the top of the Eyrie and he was right down in the valley. There was, he didn't make friends. So if I had to guess, it's just that he's an introvert who didn't want to be in a relationship, and he found it hard to make friends, and he probably found it harder to be in a relationship, or even the idea of being in a relationship. So that would be where I would go. It's not perhaps as exciting as he had some forbidden love somewhere else, but that seems to fit with his character the most. Let's go to Stephen saying or asking, do you think Lady Stoneheart will be reunited with either Edmure or Brynden? If so, how could this affect events? Could they help her rediscover her humanity? Or darkly, could she blame Edmure for everything that went wrong? I've answered some of this. I don't think that she will blame Edmure for everything that went wrong. I think she's blaming the Freys and the Lannisters. She may still be slightly castigating of him. He is still her little brother. But what he did wrong in her eyes ended when he accepted. He said, okay, basically, he said, as penance for what I've done, I will marry the Frey person. And he went through with it. She was concerned that he might be a bit grumpy about this, but it turns out that actually when he got there and he looked at it, he thought, this is an attractive Frey. I can go with this. And he actually seemed to be getting into this. And he did his part. He did get married, and he didn't make it an issue. So I don't think that there's anything there that she would hold against him. It's not his fault that Robb got killed. It's not his fault that Arya and Sansa are missing. So, and those are the things that are really, it's also not his fault about Bran and Rickon that she thinks that they're also dead. So I don't think she will hold any of those things against him. And those are the things that are driving her right now. But will they be reunited? Well, I think there's a fair to middling chance, as I say, that we could get Red Wedding 2.0, Lady Stoneheart being let into Riverrun. And if Riverrun gets taken away from the Lannisters, I could see both, either one or both of the Blackfish and Edmure pitching up there again. I could certainly see that as a possibility, and then meeting her. Will they help her rediscover her humanity? I don't think there's a way back for her. From what we've seen and understood of how the magic system works, I think that when we got Beric Dondarrion, he did not sort of get better by doing the things that he needed to do. He lost more and more of who he was. And I think that's where Lady Stoneheart will go. She will lose more and more of who she is until she feels that she can give up her grasp, her hold on life or unlife, or whatever you want to call what she has right now. I think you have to see her as a vengeful ghost. This is the way, in sort of classical understanding of how it is, the ghost story, where the ghost is clinging on to whatever semblance of life they have left, or unlife they have left, because there is something that they need to come to terms with. There is some vengeance they need to get. There is something like that, and that is where Lady Stoneheart is. This is what she's clinging on to. And so what will lead her to the point where she can let go, the way that Beric Dondarrion could eventually let go, is she needs to have some satisfaction that she's got the revenge she needs, and also to learn that yes, Rob is dead, but Bran and Rickon are not dead. She thought they were, but they're not. Arya, she finds again. Sansa has gone missing, but she's safe as well. Once she knows that her children are safe and that she has got vengeance for what happened to Rob, that's the point at which I think she will be able to let go. I don't think any pep talks from Uncle Brynden or her little brother will change that in any way. Commander Ray saying she's a revenant, a physical spirit that seeks out vengeance and can't be stopped until sated. Yeah, articulated better than I could. Wheezy Squeezebox saying a vengeful ghost with vicious groupies. Again, articulated better than I could. Thank you for that. Terra Incognita says Arya gives Lady Stoneheart mercy. This is a fan theory that I've come across, and I increasingly like. So somewhere along the line, I think that Lady Stoneheart's not going to carry on forever. And at some point, she will learn that Bran and Rickon are still alive. Some point, she will learn that Sansa's still alive. At some point, she will learn that Arya is still alive. When that's happened and she's had her revenge, she can be ready to go. If Arya is the person who she last learns about, and Arya is there and sees what used to be her mother, Arya is now a person who wishes to give, or has been taught and trained to give people the gift of death. And she has the name, currently in the book, the name she goes by is Mercy. So she can give mercy to her own mother. So yeah, I quite like this idea. I can't say it's definitely going to happen, because that's a long way away in the books. If that happens, it's at the earliest second half of the Winds of Winter. But I like it thematically. It really works for me, I have to say. Charis Ballerina, actually, first of all, agree Weirwood saying Arya as the anthropomorphism of the stranger. Yeah, I like that. Charis Ballerina picking up a question for Steve Ash Lerner Turner. Thank you very much. I love it when people do this. Saying, assuming Sansa, as we all think, becomes Queen of the North, will the Riverlands follow her, given that they swore to Rob, rather than, like in the show, staying with the other kingdoms? Well, yeah, I mean, it's all slightly up in the air. Whether I will do a video on this one at some point. I'm doing it's quite a slow series, but we are getting through it. So what's happening in the northern plot line? We've already talked about Roose Bolton and Robb Stark's will. We will get on to, at the end, what happens with Sansa, whether she will be Queen in the North. I think it's a reasonable... I mean, Lady of Winterfell, at the very least, I think seems like a reasonable way to go. Would she be made queen? Would they be asserting their independence? Well, possibly. The Riverlands, we don't often think of it, but yes, Rob was the king of the Riverlands as well. Would they wish to stay there? I mean, if Sansa was on the throne, if Jon was, then probably not. They've got the Riverlands don't really have much to do with John. They don't know he's not been down to the Riverlands. He's not one of them, whereas Rob was half Tully. John, neither the story that have we been told nor his actual parentage is from the Riverlands, so there's no real connection there. Sansa, it's possible. It's definitely possible. Could they? I mean, it really depends on the state of it all. I suspect that George R. Martin's not going to go into a huge amount of detail about all of this. I think he will end the story and not necessarily tell us all of the detail about how all of the politics is going to work out going forward. I think the main point about the Riverlands is it's going to be devastated. And whereas some parts of the Seven Kingdoms might survive relatively intact, the Riverlands is going to be depopulated and devastated. It's already had 5 books worth of being destroyed left, right, and centre. I think that there's a really good chance that just carries on. Luna Cascade saying, hello, Robert. Hi there. In your opinion, is it in Edmure's character to put himself forward as King of Westeros, as he did in the Game of Thrones TV show? What kind of king would he have been? No, I don't think it is in character. I think they just, but in that, I think they just went for the comedy thing. Would he? I mean, trying to sort of play devil's advocate for it, but yeah, if we get to this situation at the end of A Song of Ice and Fire, and they're trying to figure out who should be ruler after all of this, yeah, he may well be the longest serving head of one of the major houses, but would he? He's not shown any desire to step up from his station in life. He's shown a caring for people, but when Rob was basically made, promoted up above him, they were equals. This is why that dynamic I would have loved to see inside his head, because it was a really interesting. We always focus in on what's happening with Rob, but Rob was he was a lord of one of the 7 kingdoms. Edmure was a lord of one of the 7 kingdoms, and then all of the people in all the lords of the north said, Robb Stark, he's our king of the north. And then the Riverlands lords also did that. And what does Edmure think looking around? So what? Hang on a moment. So now this guy who used to be my level, now he's my king. We never get inside his mind, and Cat never seems to think about this. I find it a fascinating dynamic. But what is obvious is that he never seems to challenge this. Yes, he kind of, when he goes off and fights Tywin when he shouldn't do, perhaps, that's him asserting his independence a bit, trying to think on his feet as a battle commander. But that's not him challenging the authority of Robb. He's just doing what he thought was the right thing. So I don't think that he would be there putting himself forward to be king. No. What kind of king would he have been? Actually, in peaceful times, probably quite a good one, I would say. At war, no. But in peaceful times, probably quite a good one who cares about the small folk. Let's go to Michelle Ramo saying, do you think Lady Stoneheart will make it back to Winterfell with Robb's crown? And if so, she'd need to go through the neck, which makes me wonder if she will run into Howland Reed. And will Howland tell her the truth about Jon, which could potentially lead to Lady Stoneheart crowning Jon? as not just king in the north, but king of the 7 kingdoms, especially since Rob's will legitimized John. Okay, so Lady Stoneheart has Rob's crown. She's managed to get this off of the phrase, and she has the crown. Now, what does she want to do with this crown? This is a good question. She is looking for Arya. We know this. This is what, when we get the chapter where she's introduced, A Storm of Swords epilogue, the questions that they don't just kill Freys. The Brotherhood Without Banners are not just killing random Freys. They question them first. That we've heard, the Hound. Last we heard, the Hound was wandering through this part of the world. He had with him a young girl, possibly a young boy. Do you know where they went? She's looking for him. After that, they killed him. Obviously, he's a Frey. Lady Stoneheart kills Freys. But first, they wanted the information, which is, where's Arya? Lady Stoneheart, the first thing we learn that she is trying to do is find Arya. Why? Well, one of the last things that she did was try to persuade try to persuade Rob not to name John his heir. And the reason that she gave was that she thought that Arya was still alive. And if Arya was still alive, then she came before John because she was a Stark, whereas John was illegitimate. Rob had to legitimize him in order to make him his heir. So Lady Stoneheart, as Cat, will probably keep thinking the same thing she thought before, which is Rob's will actually was done on the false assumption that Arya was dead. I don't think she is dead. In fact, we've heard reports of her. We now know that she's still alive. The Brotherhood Without Banners have met her just quite recently. She was here. Now I just have to find her. I think that she would want to crown. I say marry Arya. What am I talking about? She would want to crown Arya. I think that is where she would be going with this, unless she finds that Sansa is alive and around. So, would she head north with it? Only, I think, if she thought that that's where her children were. At the moment, she doesn't think that. She doesn't think that Bran and Rickon are alive. If she thinks that Bran is alive and at Winterfell, then yes, she might do once she's killed the Freys. I think that that's it. So the first issue here is a question of timing. She's a long way south from Winterfell. It will take a long time, particularly in winter. It will take a long time to head up from the Riverlands all the way up to Winterfell. And she would only go that way if she thought that she was going with the crown to crown her son, the king. Would this change her mind about John if she then runs into Howland Reed? As I say, no. Well, yes, it would change her mind about who he was, perhaps. But if Bran is alive, that doesn't change her idea of who should be in charge, who should be inheriting Winterfell. That would be Bran and not John. John is not a Stark as far as she's concerned. Then John would be a Targaryen. Maybe he was next in line for the Iron Throne, but she will not care so much about that. So I think the short answer here is, even if she finds that John is not who she thinks he is, that does not then mean that he's the recognizable heir to Winterfell in her eyes. It might make him the recognizable heir to the Iron Throne, fine. But the North has seceded from the South, so I don't think that that's a difference. I understand, and a lot of what I have no idea whether this was where this was coming from, but a lot of what drives a lot of the questions about Jon Snow and Lady Stoneheart is actually, I think it's really quite touching. Is this desire from from a lot of people, and I've got this desire as well, is for her to realize what had been really going on and to come to terms with it and to reach some kind of satisfaction, some kind of conclusion, and to that, and actually understand what happened with Ned. And he hadn't been wrong. This was the one thing in their marriage which caused a problem, and actually she could now understand it. So I completely get this desire to say that it would be good if she met John and realized who he actually was, but I don't think that's necessary for her character journey. Northern Tommy saying, Howland, we need you to ride forth on your lizard lions. Howland Reed will make an appearance. George R. Martin has told us this. Howland Reed will make an appearance. I think Howland is going to go north, though, not just hang about in the neck. I think he's going to go north and reveal a huge amount of the truth about what's been going on in the background to this story. Increasingly, at the moment, we've got a lot of POV characters. I always count them and then forget how many there is. At least 20 POV characters we've got left. That number will be reduced by the end of the winter. I think it's probably fair to say, but increasingly we're having to think: how will we see a part of the story? We're only going to see a part of the story if we've got a POV character there. That's how George R. Martin is telling this story. And what he'd previously done was, if he needed to tell a bit of the story and there was no POV character there, then he just made a POV character, so we could see it through their eyes. So Danny leaves Marine. We've got nobody in Marine. That's okay. I know that's about to happen, so I'll make Sir Barristan a POV character. Everybody's leaving the wall. Sam's gone from the wall. Davos has gone from the wall. John's just going to be killed. We need a POV character at the wall. Otherwise, we'll have no idea what happens after John gets killed. Let's make Melisandre a POV character. That's what he's done in the past, but he's now said he's going to not create new POV characters. So the story we have from now on will be told through the eyes of those characters who've been telling us the story so far. Now, is anyone going to go to the neck? I mean, possibly. But Lady Stoneheart hasn't been a POV character. Cat obviously was, but we haven't seen anything from Lady Stoneheart's perspective. So unless he kind of like resurrects her as a POV character, then no, we won't see that. DM Collins, how much strategy or smarts can we expect from Lady Stoneheart? Lady Stoneheart's waterlogged zombie brain. Could she be cunning, or is she just revenge personified? We don't know, because we've not seen huge amounts here. She is revenge personified, but it's not just that, because we can see that she doesn't immediately just kill people. When we get that epilogue, the one that I've been talking about with Beric Frey, she questions him, or gets her people to question him first before killing him. When we get Brienne and Lady Stoneheart meet, then she doesn't just say, I'm going to kill you, the end. She actually gives Brienne a choice of what to do. And she then very clearly uses Brienne as a way to get Jaime in. So there is definitely some, maybe cunning is the right word. It's not just I'm here to get revenge, I'm just going to kill every Frey that I find. She has some kind of thought tactics behind it. So that doesn't mean that she's got all of the brain that she had before. And George R. Martin does continually try and show us that she is clever, but she has certainly got some cunning left, yes. Let's go to a question from Ninja Robbo. Hi, Robert. Hope you're well. Thank you. Riverrun seems like a cool castle and very well situated, and the Tullys are generally competent lords. If this is the case, why are they considered relatively poor and unimportant? My boring theory is that George R. R. Martin made them seem important in Book 1, then came up with a backstory of how they came to power later, leading to this apparent mismatch. But I'd much prefer a cool in-world theory. And Zvibo, connected to this, says a lot of the other houses in the Riverlands don't seem to fully respect House Tully as Lords Paramount, and even among the Lords Paramount, they sometimes seem the junior members. Obviously, the way Aegon picked them was part of that, but that doesn't seem to have changed much in the centuries since. Is that because the Tullys are still poorer or militarily weak? And if so, why have they not been able to use the resources available in their elevated position to gain the respect of some of their banner houses and peers? Are there other houses that might have been a better choice for Aegon? Right. So, why? I mean, there's a perceptions issue here, and also a kind of a realpolitik issue. The perceptions issue is, why are they still viewed as like the poorer, the less important Lords Paramount? Why do the other River Lords continue to view them not with the respect that perhaps they deserve? And then secondly, how have they not advanced themselves comparatively in that time? So in terms of perceptions, I think one of the important things to point is that they're not kings. They're not. Yes, they've got other lords who now have to look up to them and they have to do as they're told, but they're not the top of the tree. People can always go straight to the Targaryens. So, and they did. When you get Aegon IV as a general example, the Blackwoods and the Brackens went and gained their power and influence by marrying the king, or not marrying the king, but becoming his paramour, their daughters becoming his paramours. So that's the way that you can look at this with House Tully, is that actually the other River Lords didn't view them as the ultimate authority. They were just the middle managers. They weren't like the big boss. The big boss was the Targaryens. The big boss was the king. They could go straight to the king if they wanted to, and circumvent the House Tully. And there was no real opportunity in the olden days. If one of the smaller houses was causing a problem, then the Lord Paramount, or the king as it would have been then, would just squash them and put them in their place. There was less real opportunity for that to happen. Tywin managed to get away with it, but generally speaking, that wasn't really where it was going to be, or how it was going to work. The second is, how did they not improve themselves, get more money, more forces? And the answer is that they don't actually have particularly huge lands. They were given lands early on when the Andals arrived, and they sort of turned their back on House Mud as kings. And as far as we can tell, those lands have not hugely increased since then. There are lots of other houses with lots more lucrative lands, who can just create more soldiers. So unless they were going to actually annex one of their lords around them, then they were always going to stay at roughly that level. And then the other element to that is that although the amount of wars probably came down during the reign of the Targaryens, almost every single significant war that was going on happened in the Riverlands. If you look at the Dance of the Dragons, massive damage to the Riverlands. If you look at the Robert's Rebellion, the Battle of the Trident in the Riverlands, all of the Robert's the Battle of the Bells was in the Riverlands. If you look at the War of the Five Kings, it's the Riverlands that bears the brunt of this. The Riverlands is always the bit that gets pushed down. So after every single time this happens, it will have taken several years just to get back to where you were to start with. So the opportunity for them to be continually growing and gaining in money and power was actually quite limited. Martin S saying, I forgot, did House Tully have a sword or two made from steel, Valyrian steel? If so, who had them in the Song of Ice and Fire time? No, they didn't. We're not told that they did. I mean, I suppose there's a very small possibility that they do have one and we've just not been told. But no, they're certainly not proud of it. It's certainly not something we ever see Hoster or I mean, it doesn't go to Brynden. Tully doesn't have one. Edmure doesn't have one. So it doesn't seem to be passed down from generation to generation. So I think the answer is no, they don't. There's also a little bit of incidental, and I'm going to put this down as good writing for George R. R. Martin rather than just sort of he was early on in writing the book. But Cat doesn't seem to recognize that that was a Valyrian steel dagger that the Cat's Paw assassin had. She knows, she's seen ice, Ned Stark's sword, and she was asked about it. You know, could you describe it? And she can say, well, no, I didn't really take much of a look at it, but, you know, I can tell you it was sharp. That was it. She didn't seem to have been able to immediately go, oh, wow, Valyrian steel, which seems to imply perhaps she hadn't had experience of Valyrian steel all that much. Whenever she does talk about Valyrian steel, she always compares it back to ice rather than her own family's one. So anyway, the answer I think is no, they didn't. Why is that actually not a surprise? Because obviously Valyria, the doom of Valyria was 100 years before the Targaryens took over Westeros. And during that period, they were, I mean, it's hard to come up with a league table, but one could probably say the 6th or 7th most powerful family in the Riverlands. And that probably meant that if there's like the rest of the 7 kingdoms, that probably put them in, like, in terms of most powerful and richest families, I don't know, 30th or 40th, something like that. There are plenty of houses above them in the league table. So it's not actually a surprise that they didn't have a Valyrian steel sword. And then once the Doom of Valyria happened, the only way you're going to get one is by conquering someone and taking it from them, because nobody was selling them. The Lannisters tried desperately to buy one from someone, and no one, with all of their gold, and no one was handing them out. So they couldn't afford one when they were available, and when they weren't available, then they weren't available. Let's go to a question from Catherine Furseth. I was surprised to read that House Tully is of First Men descent, but maybe that's just meant as something you say about all families if you go back far enough. All the same, House Tully follows the 7 gods and seems now firmly rooted in the traditions and culture of the South. What do you think their house words, family, duty, honor, supposed to tell us about the characteristics of the house and possibly about their future? Does it show us that Cat places family before other concerns, while Ned places honor highest? Thanks. Well, the house words are supposed to be showing us, obviously, the character of the house. House Baratheon, ours is the Fury, tells us about the character of the house. The Starks, winter is coming. Interestingly, not actually about bragging about the house itself, but shows those are their house words, shows that what their primary focus is actually the north, the winter, and probably also back in the mist of time, the others. We do not so tells us what we need to know about House Greyjoy, that kind of thing. What does this family duty honor thing mean? It means they're trying to be a good house. It's not exciting. As house words go, that's not exciting. But it's good. It's nice. And I think it does show, particularly, I think, when we come to the Blackfish and Cat, what drives them. Because this is about family. The Blackfish, the moment he heard that he was needed back at River Run, he was heading back there. Even though he was estranged from his brother, even though he'd basically run away, he'd been not disinherited or anything like that, but his brother had just sort of said, no, that relationship's over. That he went back even despite all of those things. Cat, what we do seem to know about how coming back from the dead works is that something lingers, and what lingers is what's important, and what's important to her is her family and what happened to her family, and therefore revenge. So for both of them, this family thing is really important, and I think it also duty and honor as well for Edmure. That was why he gave up River Run, because he otherwise, so many people in his care would have died. Question from Warren Blythe. I'm curious if you think there are any notable connections from the Tullys to the Went/Lothston family with regard to the modern story points. Catelyn's mother was Minisa Went, and she and Sansa are said to have the same fine, high cheekbones. Mad Donnell Lothston had red hair and was said to be witchy, and the Went family served, then replaced the Lothstons. Maybe separately, is there any chance of connection from the Tully family to Jenny of Oldstones? Jenny seems to be from the rubble of House Mudd, ? And the first Tullys fought under Christopher Mudd, and Catelyn and Peter used to play at being Jenny and Duncan. Guess I'm really reaching here. Curious if Catelyn and then Sansa might have some important sneaky story echoes. Feels like Jenny of Oldstones, Donnell Lothston, ladies getting dismissed as just being pretty redheads who aren't very Stark-like. Maybe they have their own proud witchy heritage. Okay, I mean, this is the kind of thing that I love. Is George R. R. Martin trying to tell us something here, or not trying to tell us something here? And it's a little hard to sort of say, because there are echoes. He uses echoes a huge amount. For those who don't know, Mad Donnell Lothston, House Lothston they were given Harrenhal, and she was the last of the house, and she was allegedly a witch, a magic user. She had red hair. She gets a brief mention, incidentally, in Dunk and Egg. She's when the army at the end of the Mystery Notebook 3, the army amasses. Bloodraven has gathered an army. She is there, and she's leading her troops there. And we're told that she's a magic user. I wonder whether there's a link across here, because Harrenhal in the Riverlands, Bloodraven, his mother's side of the family come from the Riverlands. This is the most magic-y time for the Targaryens. Bloodraven's a magician. Shira Seastar seems to be a magician. Then we get this other magician who seems to be close enough to Bloodraven that she's part of his army. There's connections going on there. I think we will find out if we ever get Fire and Blood Part 2. I think we'd find out that there is some sort of a connection going on there. But anyway, she was deemed, apparently we're not told the details, to have gone too mad, and then she is killed. And House Went have a part in this, and As a reward, they are then given Harrenhal, and they keep Harrenhal through to the start of the Song of Ice and Fire story. So, and Cat's mother, Hoster's wife, was a Went, and we're told that the Wents have high cheekbones and very pretty jaws, which Cat does, and also Sansa does. So there is clearly, we're given this link from Sansa is like Cat. This disconcerts Peter Baelish, incidentally. If you ever want a really creepy scene, incidentally, I reread it quite recently. When Littlefinger first sees Sansa, it is so creepily awkward. Is that she's there watching the tourney, and then she like turns around and there's somebody standing behind me staring at me, and he doesn't say anything. So she then somebody has to introduce him, say who he is, and then he just says, you have to be her child, or you have to be her daughter, you look so like her. And then he just like reaches out and he strokes her cheek and holds her hair, and then just turns and walks away without saying a thing, without saying goodbye, without anything. It's like, that is so creepy. But anyway, he could see the resemblance straight away between Sansa and Cat, so we're supposed to see that as a link. Cat, we're told they have the same look as the Wents, who are associated with Harrenhal. And to complete the loop, who is now technically the Lord of Harrenhal? Peter Baelish. So there is a link going on here. And is this trying to tell us anything? I mean, I don't think so. I don't think... Yes, there's the link again, another one back to House Lothston, Mad Donnell Lothston, with the red hair. Is this trying to tell us the Cat is magical? Well, I mean, she's come back from the dead, I guess. Is this trying to tell us that Sansa is magical? Well, she seems to be the only one without any of these warging abilities, skin-changing abilities, but actually George R. Martin has said that she has. She just hasn't... she didn't have long enough to form that bond with her direwolf. So, yes, you could say there's an echo of something here, that he's trying to sort of show these characters might not have seemed very magical, but there's going to be magical stuff going on here. That's definitely there. I think the link across to Old Stones, Jenny of Old Stones, I don't think that's anything in particular, but yeah, it's quite high level stuff, this. And I don't think this is a hugely significant thing of what George R. Martin is trying to tell us, but I do really like the thinking on that. Martin S. I was wondering about Brynden Blackfish Tully. He seems like quite a competent man. What skills had he developed? He seemed like an excellent archer. What about military commander? Yes, so he was a leader. Definitely was a leader. What we're told about him in particular, he's good at the scouting side of things. He is an excellent archer, but he's certainly a good scout. We're told he's an excellent swimmer, which I suppose is useful when you grow up in the middle of two rivers. And it also, I think, probably reassures us that he was let out into a river. This is where Edmure lets him out under the... They've got sort of like it's probably a technical term for this, but a river portcullis. He just sort of raised it enough that the Blackfish could swim under it and out without anyone really noticing. But the fact that we're told that he's a strong swimmer certainly seems to imply that he did survive that. He didn't just like get caught up in some weird currents or something. So he's a good fighter. He's a leader. He certainly seems to... He led the van when after the Battle of the Whispering Wood, when they then have this battle against the armies besieging River Run, he led the van there. So he was basically in charge of the charge, and that was successful. So yes, he's a good military commander. He certainly is good on the more sort of sneaky side of things. But he is also, let's not forget, he was the younger brother of Hoster. But he is also getting on a bit now. So he will have lost a little bit of his edge. He's still an incredibly strong presence. But yeah, military commander, good. We don't see him in any huge battles. He won a lot of plaudits and became reasonably famous in the Battle of the Ninepenny Kings. Incidentally, that's where he sort of gained his fame as being a good fighter. There are quite a few people gained fame there, but he was definitely one of them. Charis Ballerina, who knew about Lysa's indiscretion with Littlefinger? What would have happened to her had John Arryn not been desperate for an heir? Did Tansy T cause her miscarriages? Yes, on the last bit. In terms of who knew, they kept it really hushed. Obviously, the two of them knew, and Hoster found out. But beyond that, no. The cat seems to be largely, I mean, she's aware of a bit of what was going on, but she seems certainly unaware of all of the later stuff that happened. What would have happened to her had John Arryn not been desperate for an heir? It wasn't just the matter that he was desperate for an heir. It was the fact that they had to lock in the alliance. So when John Arryn married Lysa, this was, incidentally, George R. R. Martin pronounces it Lisa, in case you wanted to know. He doesn't care how you pronounce his characters' names, but yeah, I always find it amusing when he pronounces a character name completely differently to how we do. But yeah, I say Lysa. So when they got married, the whole point was to cement that coalition together. It was the North, the Riverlands, and the Vale of Arryn. And the three of them all basically at the same time joined one big marriage pact. So that assured each other that they were going to be on the same side, and nobody was going to turn over to the other side and betray them, because they now had a marriage pact between all of them. So that was what was going on. It was, yes, he did want an heir, but this was necessary for the coalition. Let's actually the Tansy thing I will pick up. So Ty Farnsworth, you asked about this as well. Because this came up here, it's come up a couple of times before, I will pick up this question now. Ty Farnsworth saying, I'm wondering if you can go into more depth on the character of Tansy. Who was she? What does it mean for the final moments of Hoster Tully? Now, this, I've actually got the got this bit open in front of me. What we have here is a situation where well, I'll read it and then I'll sort of explain why different people are coming out with different thoughts from this. So she is there, Cat is there with her dying father. He's old, he seems to have some sort of dementia or something along those lines. He's not thinking straight, but she's keeping him company. She's under house arrest, but she's keeping him company. She's thinking about her children, and it is a monstrous, cruel thing to lose a child, she whispered softly, more to herself than to her father. Lord Hoster's eyes opened. Tansy, he husked in a voice thick with pain. He does not know me. Catelyn had grown accustomed to him taking her for her mother or her sister Lysa, but Tansy was a name strange to her. It's Catelyn, she said. It's Cat, father. Forgive me. The blood. Oh, please, Tansy. Could there have been another woman in her father's life? Some village maiden he had wronged when he was young, perhaps? Could he have found comfort in some serving wench's arms after mother died? It was a queer thought, unsettling. Suddenly she felt as though she had not known her father at all. Who is Tansy, my lord? Do you want me to send for her, father? Where would I find the woman? Does she still live? Lord Hoster groaned. Dead. His hand groped for hers. You'll have others, sweet babes, and trueborn. Others, Catelyn thought. Has he forgotten that Ned is gone? Is he still talking to Tansy? Or is it me now? Or Lysa? Or Mother? When he coughed, the sputum came up bloody. He clutched her fingers. Be a good wife, and the gods will bless you. Sons, trueborn sons. Okay, so that's the scene. And Cat, she even goes out from this just wondering, who is this Tansy that my father is talking about? And she asks around, and nobody really seems to know what this is. And so when we're reading this for the first time, we probably also, one, because Cat usually figures stuff out. We also like, is this some Tansy? Is this some woman? But if you listen to that as if he was thinking that this is Lysa, what he's saying is, no, forgive me, the blood, oh please. And then he says, dead, but you'll have others, sweet babes and trueborn. Be a good wife, the gods will bless you, sons, trueborn sons. He's talking to Lysa after he's given her some tansy tea, which is basically tea to, abort a pregnancy. And he is feeling guilty about it on his deathbed. He is saying, I can see the blood. He's feeling bad about this. The child is dead. He wants to he wants to reassure her that she will have children in the future, but he's feeling terrible about it. So that's what's going on there. And it's only a bit later when we get a throwaway comment actually from Lady Smallwood to Arya. No, not even to Arya. Arya was listening in about tansy tea, which is clearly what women drink after sleeping with someone to make sure that they don't have any children. That is in world, and that is what is going on here. And so, whereas she goes away thinking that Tansy is a person, because it is a name of a person, we meet a few Tansies in this story, whereas it is a name for a poison, that's not what's going on in his head. Let's go to question from Auntie Slayer. Lady Stoneheart seems so different from the other whites to me. Beric still had some sense of humanity after dying several times, but Lady Stoneheart almost seems as if she doesn't have the capacity for deep understanding, which is exacerbated by her inability to speak. What do you think she really has going on inside her head? Do you think she has the ability to process information and rationalize in any way, or is she completely powered by revenge? Cat was such a deep character, and the only thing that seems to remain is her motherly protective instincts. I think she is the most dead of the undead, aside from the ones beyond the wall. Well, yeah, so we'll dig into this a little bit more. My working theory, which I kind of set out most recently in the Kyber, is that he has figured out, we'll come back to Lady Stoneheart in just one moment, but Kyburn has figured out one of the fundamental things about how the world of Ice and Fire operates, particularly when it comes to life and death. And he tells this story to Jamie asks if he believes in ghosts, and he tells this story of once when he was in a citadel and he went into a room and there was a chair there, and the chair had a little indentation on it, and there was still a slight fragrance in the air. And he could tell that although there was no one there now, a woman had been sat in that chair just a moment before, because something lingered. The scent of her, the impression that she'd left on the chair, something lingered. And he thought that that's what happens after you die. Something lingers. Now, that seems to be what we see in, say, Beric Dondarrion. Is that because he talks about his experience, he reflects on it, and he says things like, parts of who I am are not there anymore. I can't remember what the woman I was engaged to looks like, or even her name. I can't remember where I grew up. So bits of him is gone, but what remains, what lingers, is this desire to do the thing that he was out doing when he was killed, which is basically the Brotherhood without banners. These are people who are there trying to help the small folk serve the true king, basically, and not all of these warring factions going around in the Riverlands. So that was what lingered for him. Now, it got worse. Every time he died and came back, it got worse. And there was what lingered. It just boiled down to that. The other bits of who he was had gone. So we would expect something similar with Lady Stoneheart. Lady Stoneheart was dead for days. So whatever lingered is less or more concentrated than with Beric Dondarrion, because he was brought back, almost straight away, within hours. So Lady Stoneheart, I think, I would agree, there is less of Catelyn Stark there than from someone like Beric Dondarrion. There was amount of him left. Lady Stoneheart has boiled down basically what lingers, seemingly, is that drive, the last thing that she was thinking and feeling, this need, his care about her family, which is clearly the central part of who she is as a person, family, duty, honor, but also this need for revenge, because the last things that she saw were people killing her son, her family, this need for revenge. So yes, I absolutely 100% agree that she's less, or the most dead of the undead from this side of the wall. I would agree with that. I don't think she's completely powered by revenge. She's also searching for Arya, which seems to imply that she's wanting to make things right in some way, protect her. There's something there that's not just about revenge. She's not forgotten about, which she could have done. We don't make the rules here. She could have forgotten about her, her daughters, and just been about revenge for what happened at the Red Wedding. It could have boiled down just to that one moment that happened, and she's trying to get revenge, but it doesn't. It's slightly broader. It's about finding Arya. Kirsty Angel, Old Bear, is this picking up a question for someone else? Thank you very much. If so, a man of Night's Watch takes no wife and fathers no sons. Our wife is duty, our mistress is honor, and you are the only sons we'll ever know. Benjen says it too. Are these Tully's words, family, duty, and honor? Oh, sorry, the Old Bear, sorry. This is the Old Bear being J.R. Mormont. A man of the Night's Watch takes no wife, fathers no sons. Our wife is duty, our mistress is honor, and you are the only sons we'll ever know. Are these the Tully family? Yeah, there's an interesting echo there, isn't there? Our wife is duty, mistress is honor, and then we have family. So yeah, there's an echo. It's a good one. That is more a sort of a found family, is probably the wrong way of saying it, but the family, the Night's Watch are trying to create this bond. You could argue artificially create this bond in a way that the Tullys have it seemingly naturally. So yeah, it's a good observation. Thank you for that. Ty Farnsworth question saying, I wonder if you could... Oh, this was one I've done it already. So Auntie Slayer, another question. In A Dance with Dragons, Quentin sees Kago's Arak and thinks there are hundreds of Valyrian longswords in the world, but only a handful of Araks. That being said, we only know of a handful of these longswords. Do the Tullys have any Valyrian weapons of note? You would think with hundreds out there, every major house, let alone the Lords Paramount of the Riverlands, would have one. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but let me talk about the numbers. So hundreds in the world. Tyrion estimates, he's read books, he knows which families and the like have got Valyrian steel weapons. Tyrion estimates that there are about 200 in Westeros. So if you look at the distribution of these, then they're not all, it would appear they're not all for like the top noble families. Some, the Targaryens had at least 3, let's not forget. They had Blackfire, Dark Sister, and also what we know as the Cat's Paw Dagger. There may have been more. The fact that Cat's Paw Dagger seems to have been taken all the way up to Winterfell and back without anybody really knowing or noticing, that seems to imply maybe they had another few Valyrian steel things there, because having lost 2 Valyrian steel swords, you would have thought that if all they had left of Valyrian steel was this one dagger, they would have taken better care of it. But I don't know. That's just a random thought. The Targaryens had at least 3. And then the rest, there were most of the major houses, the Lord's Paramount type houses, had one, but not all of them. Then you would get a lot of the other houses who were the richer houses seem to have gained them, but again, not all of them. We don't hear of House Frey having them. In fact, in terms of ones that we know the names of and where they are, we've only got something like about a dozen, it has to be said. And of them, a surprisingly large proportion have disappeared. The Lannister sword has disappeared. The 2 Targaryen swords have disappeared. A sword disappears somewhere in the Dragon Pit, in the storming of the Dragon Pit. Valyrian steel swords are so hugely valuable. Valyrian steel just generally is so hugely valuable that if there's a chance for somebody to just take one, then they will. So it's not a matter of, if you're a big house, you definitely have a Valyrian steel sword. That's not how this works. If you're a big house and you wanted one to show you how big and powerful you were, and you had the money to do that, then yes, you probably did. Some probably gained them in war or gifting or something like that. So House Mormont have one, and the working assumption is that they must have gained this in battle in some way, possibly from the Iron Islands, because they're not a rich family. But it's not all of the top families have them. Let's go to Mr. Worldwide saying, hello, Robert. I can't explain it, but there's something quite appealing to me about Riverrun in both the books and the show. Where does Riverrun rank for you amongst the other castles of the realm? When all's said and done, who do you think will be lords of Riverrun, assuming it's still standing? And Maura Lee asking what I think House Tully's fate will be at the end of the book series. So how do I rank Riverrun? I mean, I think it's a great castle. I mean, I loved how it looked on Game of Thrones, I have to say. It's sort of not one of the top tier, so Storm's End, the Eyrie, Casterly Rock, even Winterfell, Harrenhal. These are like the top tier legendary castles of the land. But it's definitely up there as a second top tier. It's not the kind of thing that people think we could never. How on earth could somebody ever siege this and win? But it is a hard place to get to because it can cut itself off from the shores. Yes, it's an impressive castle. What about the end? I want to point out, before I talk about the end point for House Tully, one thing which may or may not be important when it comes to Riverrun. If the others get down as far south as there, then firstly, this is going to be horrific for Westeros. But one thing which seems to be the case is their inability to cross running water. So I've many times pointed out the coincidence, I think not, of the hugely important places in the potential battle against the others being islands, by which I mean you need Dragonglass to be fighting the army of the dead. Where is that? That's on Dragonstone, which is an island. Dawn, many people think, is going to be an incredibly important weapon in the fight against the others. Where does that live? On Starfall, which is an island. The Children of the Forest are going to be hugely important in the fight against the others. Where is seemingly the heart of the Children of the Forest and the Weirwood Network? The Isle of Faces, which is an island. So islands, things inside, so things surrounded by water seem to be quite important. And Riverrun is a castle surrounded by running water. It can literally just sit in the middle of a river. So I think there's a fair to middling chance, if the others do get that far south, and they might, if the others do get that far south, that Riverrun will turn from being just like a random, quite important castle to suddenly a place that is, this is safety. This is where humans can go. Keep an eye out for that as a possibility. In terms of whether they will survive, I think Lady Stoneheart will at some point, her story will reach its end. And Lysa is obviously already dead. We don't know with the Tullys, their wider family. We're not ever really told about it. They're one of these families where we know the immediate generations, but beyond that, who would inherit? We don't know. So my best guess is that yes, maybe the Blackfish this will be his last hurrah and he will die heroically somewhere. I think Edmure may survive. If not him, then maybe his child might survive. So I think that he's one of those characters. I think George R. R. Martin probably has more sympathy for him than many book readers do. And I think there's a reasonable chance that he could survive, and just the family will carry on through him. If you were to try and draw the Riverlands back together, and an alliance with the Freys, if the Freys are still around at the time, might be a good thing, which is what he's got. Okay, I've got one more question from my patrons. This is the time to drop any more questions into the chat. I will try and answer as many of them as I possibly can. Chloe Lyon, off topic, but it's Valyrian steel based. Where is Blackfire, and where has it been since it disappeared with Bittersteel? I think Bittersteel held on to it. He didn't give it to Daemon's second Blackfire, nor did he give it to the Golden Company. He clearly kept it for who he wanted to be the next king. And I think it's now with Illyrio. I think that the Blackfire line has travelled down through Illyrio's wife, and that is where it is. And I think we will find it coming back into the story, being presented by Illyrio effectively to Fagon as a symbol of him, that as they claim he is the true heir of the Iron Throne. Andrew K saying, speaking of Valyrian Steel, Nightfall and Red Rain seem so aptly named in Ironborn hands, considering what Euron is up to. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of dark stuff going on there. Commander Ray saying they're so valuable, not even cash-strapped Jorah was willing to sell Longclaw. Yeah, absolutely. That would have solved all of their problems. Maura Lee, thank you very much, Maura, saying, for Lady Stoneheart, hoping that she finds peace at the end of A Song of Ice and Fire. Yeah, absolutely. Charis Ballerina picking up a question for Brimpy Spingle. Great name. Catelyn's mother was a Went. What is your best guess as to what that would make Oswell Went to her? Uncle, cousin, etc. What did the Wents do in Robert's rebellion? Right, okay, interesting. So we're not told, so Minissa Went, we're not told what relation she was. So Oswell, in terms of sort of age, so Oswell Went, we're not told exactly, but he was, seems to have been still a good fighter and in his prime. So let's put him at about in his 30s or 40s. Minissa Went would have been probably the generation older than that. So, if I had to guess, an aunt, but that's just purely a guess, I would say. What did the Wents do in Robert's rebellion? Well, I think that the bit of sort of geeky stuff that I'm most looking forward to this year, if it happens, is the Tourney at Harrenhal stage play. George R. R. Martin, he last gave an update on it late last year, I think, when he was in London for a couple of weeks. He met with the writer and the producer, and he said basically it's coming along really well, and although he didn't want to tempt fate, he was hoping that maybe by the end of 2024 it might be on a stage somewhere. So if we get that, then it's not going to be called the Tourney at Harrenhal. The working title at the moment is The Iron Throne, incidentally, but it's about the Tourney at Harrenhal. And that we will find out so much more about things like this. So House Went, so Oswell Went is actually, I think, quite a critical character here. The Tourney at Harrenhal almost certainly was set up, funded by Rhaegar, in order to subtly call together the Lords of the Land and have a big discussion about what to do about his dad, the Mad King, with a view to depending on how charitable you want to be giving him a soft retirement or doing a soft coup, getting him out of power and putting Rhaegar in place. So that was the cunning plan, all very hush-hush secret, but in order for that to happen, Rhaegar needed it to be somewhere with some people that he could trust. Yes, Harrenhal was a central place where everyone could get to. Yes, it was a big place where everybody could amass. And yes, if he was looking to put the thought into people's minds about great councils, then Harrenhal was the place to go. But it had to be with a family that he trusted. And this Oswell Went was a member of the Kingsguard who seems to have been part of Rhaegar's inner circle. So he then was with Rhaegar. If you've never thought about the logistics of how this worked, Rhaegar didn't set off alone from Dragonstone to go and pick up Lyanna. Nor did he go there direct. He left in a group. Rhaegar and I can't remember the exact wording that they use in the World of Ice and Fire, but it's Rhaegar and his companions. So he went with a group of people. The two people who were definitely there were Arthur Dane and Oswald Went. So he was absolutely at the heart of what was going on. He was the person who arranged the tourney at Harrenhal, which is where Rhaegar met Lyanna in the first place, and he was there with Rhaegar when he picks up Lyanna, and then they end up at the Tower of Joy. So Oswald Went was a Rhaegar loyalist, and his family, by extension, were also Rhaegar loyalists. Now, how that plays across into Robert's rebellion itself, well, we're not told precisely, other than the fact that the Wents survived, because they're in the they're still there, or a Went is still there when we get to A Song of Ice and Fire. But also, intriguingly, although I already said the battles happen in the Riverlands, they actually happen in this kind of circle around the outside of the Riverlands. The battle of the Bells, the battle of I can't remember what the name of the battle was now, but when the Reach forces win the only battle where Robert Baratheon lost, that happens just sort of down in the border of the Reach and the Riverlands, and then the Battle of the Trident obviously happens close to Harrenhal, but not actually at Harrenhal. So it sort of happens in this kind of circle around there. So finding, as I say, to bring this back to where it was before, there is a gap here. We know that they are Rhaegar loyalists, and we know that Rhaegar's position in this battle, this war, was he kind of like sat it out while it appeared to be people rebelling against his father, because he'd been about to rebel against his father. But then when it turned out that this seemed to be, once Robert Baratheon was saying he wanted to be king, and this turned not to be a rebellion against his father, but this is a rebellion against Targaryen rule per se, then he came out on the side of the Targaryens. Now, my best guess is that House Went, although Robert Baratheon did forgive a lot of people, House Went were not rabidly fighting the war on either side. Though they were, they owed their loyalty to the Tullys, obviously, who were part of Robert's side. Question from the Basman. This is my last question from a patron, saying a bit of an admin question this week, which you're more than welcome to. I started my annual rewatch of your live streams, which is quite an epic feat. So I hope you enjoyed that. And I noticed that you used to give a recap of stuff that happened that week concerning news or interviews about all the content you cover. Is there a particular reason you stopped doing that? I liked it a lot, as I don't have time to follow every bit of news myself. Well, yeah, I did. It was, I mean, it's just sort of, it wasn't a conscious decision to start with, but I suppose it then became it. Yes, I used to, these live streams a few years ago, I would, at the beginning of every live stream, I would sort of say, well, this week, this is what happened. There was George R. Martin blog post about this. There was this happened, announcement of this Witcher show, or whatever it was. I sort of stopped doing them when I had a few weeks in a row of there being no news, is the honest answer, which sometimes happens. And then I just sort of didn't pick up on it. But then I thought, actually, you know what? Most people don't watch these live. Most people do watch them back later. So hello, by the way. If you made it this far and you're not watching it live, I'm very aware that a lot of people do this, and you're welcome, and I'm glad you're enjoying it. But yes, the majority of people, the vast majority of people, in fact, do not watch these live streams live, and so my thinking was that perhaps that's not as appropriate. But this is a question for you. If you are watching this back a bit later, would you find it useful to have something like that? I was wondering whether maybe to do like short form videos every week or month or something, just with just highlights of stuff you might have missed. That, by the way, did you know that there's going to be another Lord of the Rings film happening in December this year? Did you know that there's going to be another Witcher book? Andrei Sapkowski's writing another Witcher book happening. That kind of thing. Would you find that useful in a short form video or not? Just let me know in the comments. I'd find that interesting. So, it was initially, it wasn't intentional, and then it sort of turned vaguely intentional, but I'd love to hear people's thoughts on it. Okay. I've got another question here from Marcus Wynn saying, do you think the cat's paw dagger started Robert's rebellion? In the lore, we are told that Rhaegar read a scroll, but with House of the Dragon, we saw the prophecy on the dagger. I also think this drove Rhaegar mad. Rhaegar read a scroll, after which we're told he sort of went down to the training yard and said, it appears I need to be a warrior. Before, he'd been quite a bookish kid, didn't get out much, but then he reads a scroll, which then says it appears I need to be a warrior. So the scroll convinced him that he was the prince that was promised. So the connection, obviously, to the cat's paw dagger is that dagger we saw in House of the Dragon contained, when you put it in the fire, it had this little, I can't remember the exact wording of it, but it was basically say, from my line shall be the prince that was promised, or something along those lines, which it's not very clear exactly what that means, but the implication is that tied in with a wider prince that was promised prophecy. So my take is that the prince that was promised prophecy was older. It was kind of brought back in again by the Woods Witch, but this was an older prophecy that will have been in scrolls, and that was what Rhaegar read. The cat's paw dagger was taking that prophecy and saying, there's this character called the Prince that was promised who's going to save the world. That's going to come from the Targaryens. It's a Targaryen. So that, I think, is what the Prince that was promised thing there is. The Woods Witch got more specific and said not just any Targaryen, but from the line of these two Targaryens. So that's where it is. So we have an initial prince that was promised prophecy. Some prince is going to be defeating the others, or whatever that says. Then we have this connected in. Aegon the Conqueror says, and that prince that was promised is going to be a Targaryen ruler. And then we get it in even more from the Woods Witch. So that's the way I think it goes. So did that start Robert's rebellion? No. I think it's the short answer. There's a lot of things that you could argue started Robert's rebellion, but the actions of Aerys were probably the main driver, it has to be said. When you say you think it drove Rhaegar mad, if you meant Aerys, I can understand that, but I don't think it was that in particular. Commander Ray saying it would be cool if you have a short news video or stream once a month. Okay, yep, maybe. Others sort of saying, yeah, I'd watch that. And maybe on shorts. Yep. Okay. All right. I will take that. And maybe I'll try something and see how it goes. Reflective rambling. Oh, you're back. I thought you went away earlier. Great to see you back. Saying Chaz, picking up for Chazzel. Thank you very much. I love it when people do this. What do you think will happen if Arya thinks all men must die, but Stoneheart stuck around for her revenge even after reuniting with Arya? So yeah, the all men must die thing. I mean, this is something in my Faceless Men series. I feel instinctively that we treat all men must die as being Valar Morghulis, as kind of a catchphrase almost, which kind of empties it of meaning. But it feels to me, given what the Faceless Men believe, that actually this is a statement of faith, an article of faith. All men must die. They are a religion. The Faceless Men are not just a cool assassin guild. They're a religion. They believe in the many-faced God. And this is their belief. All men must die. And so when they see people not dying, that's heresy in their eyes. So, yes, I think a Faceless Man would look at Lady Stoneheart and say, this is against the laws of nature. This is against what should be happening. She should be dead. Her time had come. She should be dead. She should not be back. Will Arya be indoctrinated enough at that point if she comes back and meets Lady Stoneheart that she will agree with her? Perhaps partly. And this is where I talked about this a bit earlier in the stream. I like this idea. It's an idea that's been around in the fandom for a while, that she will show mercy to her mother, to Lady Stoneheart, and free her and release her, give her the gift of death. It's quite dark. In fact, it's very dark, but it's there's something about it that kind of works with her name being Mercy as well. So it's possible, whether that's and her sort of saying, and then Valar Morghulis as she does this. You can see that. Let's flick through a few questions. IDG Live. So Andrew K saying, with the Tullys dynamic to other Riverlands houses, it's simply so different being handed the role versus long-established dominance via conquest as in other regions. Yep, absolutely. Andrew K's talking about graphic novels. This is coming something from George R. R. Martin, who's talked about all of the different... quick digression here, I guess, but we've been told of so many, up to 9 at some point, possible spin-offs from Game of Thrones. Obviously, we know House of the Dragon is already on our screens. Dunk and Egg, they're going to start filming soon. We recently had a sort of a... I think it was a soft leak. I think that they allowed to come out the idea of, we're investigating doing an Aegon's Conquest series. This is the kind of thing HBO actually do quite a lot when they don't do it officially, but they're just sort of like testing the waters a little bit. Just leak out a story. We're considering it and see how people react. I think the reaction was generally quite positive to that, so it wouldn't surprise me if that does get brought forward. But some of them, he says, won't happen. Some of these ideas won't happen, but that doesn't mean that they will never see the light of day, because nowadays you could have a graphic novel of something. If it doesn't make it as a TV show, maybe you could have it as a graphic novel, which I think is great as an idea from him for how do we take lots of people's... some of these ideas people have been working on for years now. If they've just suddenly fall by the wayside, that doesn't mean all of that work has to go to waste. If George R. R. Martin likes it, but HBO decide that this wouldn't really work as a TV show, that it might have another chance. And I like that, I have to say. And Zach K adding possibility of a graphic novel or animation, something during the Long Night or the Doom of Valyria. Yeah, I think it would have to be something George R. R. Martin has has put the thumbs up on both of those because they're such important moments in the history of this universe. I think he would have to have signed off on them in some way. Kirsty Angel, since you're doing a reading of Dracula at the moment, do you see a lot of parallels in A Song of Ice and Fire? And if so, would you consider doing a Dracula, A Song of Ice and Fire parallel stream? Oh, well, I mean, in terms of the stream, I mean, I've generally found that people prefer the streams to focus in on one issue rather than trying to compare and contrast two. It's just my experience of what people have liked. In terms of Dracula, are there any parallels? Well, the undead thing clearly is a parallel. One thing stylistically, which is there, is we now know vampires. Vampires have been around in literature for so long that we kind of lose track of the idea that there was a time when, yeah, I mean, vampires are not new, but as a sort of a as an idea, but as the modern understanding of what a vampire is, that does come from Bram Stoker. And yes, I'm also aware of John Polidori as well. In case anyone goes down that route, I've done that one for that story as well, the vampire for the Well Told Tale. But Bram Stoker popularized this, and when people read that book, the way that the character Dracula was introduced, it is quite scary because you do not know what this person's capable of. You do not know what this person wants. You don't understand all this person's powers. You don't understand the background. There's this feeling of helplessness and horror because you cannot understand everything about it. And that George R. R. Martin, that feel George R. R. Martin has picked up in the others. We're now, let's not forget, we're 5 books in, and we got a lot of stuff about the others on the TV show. They didn't develop all of it, obviously, but we got a lot there. In the books, let's not forget, how many times have we actually seen or experienced the others? 2, 3? It's not that many. We hear the legends of them. We hear the rumors. We see evidences of them, but we don't know what they are yet in the books. We don't know all they're capable of yet in the books. And that's what's scary. And that's the same kind of feel that we get in Dracula. The other thing, which I think is a sort of a parallel, I guess, and obviously like the undead thing, characters coming back and being different. When you get bitten by a vampire and then they come back, they become scary, and that the Lady Stoneheart link across is very clear there. But there's the running water is the other thing I'd point out. This is not just a vampire thing. This is historical. This is from folk traditions, particularly in Eastern Europe, but also elsewhere, that the undead cannot cross running water. And George R. R. Martin seems to be going with that for the others in The Song of Ice and Fire. So, which is why the wall ends at the water. Otherwise, yeah, people do get in boats and go round the wall. But clearly they didn't think this was an issue with the others. The wall goes up to the water, and then that's fine. So, yeah, the running water thing I think is interesting because it's not yet been stated, but all the hints are there. Interesting question. Thank you very much. Right, let's go to Jeremy Cass saying first time catching one of these live. Greatly appreciated. Thank you. Great to see you. You've just come in just as I'm drawing to a close, actually. But I have a couple more things that I will talk about very quickly. So next week, I promised this for a few weeks now, but next week I finally managed to get Aziz on. Aziz from History of Westeros. He's going to be on next week, and we're going to do a breakdown of Book 3 of A Song of Ice and Fire, A Storm of Swords. If you're a long-time viewer or listener to these, then you'll know that I've been doing a very long and slow listen through of A Song of Ice and Fire, just doing one chapter at a time, listening to it, which gives us different experience to reading it. Incidentally, if you've never tried doing that and you want a different way of doing of interrelating with a book, then listening to somebody else read it is very different from reading it yourself, because they will bring their own interpretation to it, which will often give you different ways of looking at the text. But anyway, I'm doing this re-listen to, I very slowly re-listen to chapter by chapter, having a think about it between each one, which is taking me a very long time, but it means when I get to the end of a book, I really want to discuss it. And Aziz came on the previous 2 books when I finished them on my listen through, and it was just before Christmas when I finished book 3. But I will have him back on again and we will talk our way through it. So I know people have really liked that when we did that the last 2 times, so I thought I'd bring him back on for this. So that's happening. I've got a video coming out tomorrow. I always forget what video I have coming out. I think this time it's me attempting to answer the classic question of, is Stannis the true king? So everyone's got views on this, but I've come to my own conclusion. So if you want to see that, then that's coming out on the main channel tomorrow. There will be more short form videos coming out on this over the coming few days. Don't forget about the Well Told Tale. Next week, we've got the live stream, same place, same time. If you're watching this back a little bit later, appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to other live streams if you'd like to watch them. Appearing somewhere around here is a link to my Patreon page, which is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so. But that is all for this time. Take care, everyone, and I will see you again soon.